been alerted that we're good to go. I'd like to call this evening's meeting to order. This is the first of the 2024-25 Board of Finance budget hearings, and tonight we welcome the Board of Education. If you would all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence, and I'd like us to remember Barbara Mecca, mother of Councilman Bill Mecca, who passed away recently. And also, if you would just say a little prayer for those Board of Education members who have had some small mishaps and are recovering nicely. Our best wishes out to Tim Gallo and to Julia McNamee, and just to wish them well. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. Phyllis, will you call the roll?
Laney McHugh.
Here.
Marty Isaac.
Here.
Paul Timpanelli. Here. Mark Mascola.
Here.
Vinnie DiGennaro.
Here.
Christina Alaris.
Here.
Rosemary Seaman.
Here.
David Galla.
Here.
Okay, Dr. Semmel.
Here.
Dr. Iwaniki.
I'm here.
Scott.
That's
Oh, your name? I'm sorry, Scott.
I'm here. I'm again.
Sorry, I don't know how that happens. Did you get when you cut and paste? Dr. Iwaniki.
Here.
Mr. Hendrickson. Dave Cody.
Here.
Dean Catalano.
Here.
Christina Heffley.
Here.
Joseph Cella.
Here.
Jeff Van Steenberg.
Here.
Tony Dorsey from the Finance Committee? No? Okay. John Foreman? Kevin Shively?
Here.
Richard Wolf? Tony Cinto? Ann Sather?
Here.
Nikki Satin?
Here.
Mary Isaac?
Here.
Lucinda Timpanelli?
Here.
Jackie Norcell? Lisa Newland?
Here.
Christopher Bandici? Tim Gallo? Julie McNamee? Maria Petiti?
Here.
And Allison Squicimaro. The update. Okay. I'm done. Thank you.
Okay. I want to welcome everybody. You'll notice that there's no public comments on tonight's agenda. We do welcome all public comments in regards to the budget. We'll have two public hearings. The first one will be, I believe, next Thursday evening. It will be done via Zoom on March 14th, and our regular meeting will follow that as well on Zoom. Also, we have a public hearing scheduled for Saturday, March 23rd, here in Council Chambers from 10 to 12. That will be live, but I believe it will be a hybrid meeting as well, so there will be an opportunity for people from the community to tune in. I wanted to take a moment just to kind of set the tone for the meeting tonight. I want to let everybody know who's in the room. We have not only our staff, our Board of Education, and our staff and administrators from the Board of Education, but we also have the Finance Committee from the Town Council and the Board of Finance members and alternates. We invite the Town Council finance members to participate in these meetings to get as many questions answered ahead of time so that when we go to the next phase in the process, we're a little less redundant. It seems to have worked well, so we like to keep that tradition going. On Monday, the 4th, the First Selectman transmitted her budget proposal to the Board of Finance, and her proposal for this year in total is $204,543,321. That's an awful lot of money. It represents a total spending increase of 3.64% overall. And if there are no changes in the budget process, there will be a tax increase of approximately 1.96%. Tonight, as we begin our review of this proposal, with the first of our department meetings, I want to make sure that we set the tone. And as we discuss the Board of Education operating budget, their request to the first selectman was $126,133,488, which represented a 5.34% increase over last year, or an increase of about $6 million. The first selectman's recommendation for the Board of Education is a 4% increase, or $4.79 million over last year's budget, or the current year's budget. Next Tuesday, we'll start meeting with other departments as well. Those meetings will be held on Zoom, but it's good for all of us to get together. This is the largest part of the budget. It does represent almost 2/3 of the overall town budget, and we want to make sure that we achieve a simple goal: to have significant and respectful dialogue as to how our town best provides for the educational and social emotional needs of our students as well as our staff. I personally have a really deep appreciation of all that goes into the Board of Education and the daily operations. I've, over the years, not only watched my children go through the system, but I have been an active volunteer. I have listened, I have attended all of the meetings, and then became involved in the budget. It's very important to me that people understand the complexity of navigating 7,000 moving parts. And it really is a challenge. I've seen how scheduling happens at the high school alone. I've seen how the athletic department manages nearly 1,600 student athletes on, I think there's 39 different teams. That doesn't even account for any of the academic programs and other extracurricular activities, not just the reading, writing, and arithmetic. So it's really important that we have this discussion and that we do it respectfully and in the right way. I do want to acknowledge some of the great things that are happening in our school system right now. We have a new esports team that took first place in the state competition. The basketball team tied for first and won the FCIAC. We have the first ever female wrestler state champion. The robotics team went to the World Championship this year. The DECA team has done extremely well, highlighted by my niece, who's a freshman, who took second place in the sports management. So I'm very proud of Georgia. The We the People team are again state champions. The gymnastics team, for the first time ever, are state champions, and they're headed to nationals in Virginia next month. Sheridan Oberhan is the FCIAC Player of the Year for girls basketball and has scored 1,000 career points. Those are amazing achievements and just a short list of all the things that happen. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Semmel, our superintendent, and have him start with the presentation. If you haven't gotten one, there are some packets available for anybody who wants to follow along, and this presentation will be available online for those at home.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. And we look forward to presenting our budget tonight. This is a budget that was adopted by the Board of Education on February 6th. It was unanimously adopted. And I am the fortunate one who gets to bring you through a number of slides tonight. My goal will be to go through some of these fairly quickly for the sake of time aspect, but certainly can slow down if people would like to. But I want to make sure we provide the story we want to tell about our budget so you have a better situational understanding about where we are with our current budget. And you have it all in front of you, too. There'll be a few people who will join me up here during this particular presentation. So we'll kind of move around a little bit as we go. And then, of course, we'll want to answer as many questions as we can tonight.
I was just going to ask, would it be okay? I'll have you pause where you feel questions will best fit, and we'll open it up then. And I'll go through Board of Finance members and then open for Finance Committee members from the Town Council as well.
We can do that. The way we put this together, it might make sense to go through the whole thing, but if you'd like to stop along the way, we're adaptable. We can do that.
Let's see how far we get before people
Sure.
start making noises, and we'll go from there.
Well, that is it. We don't want to get people to be too glassy-eyed before we get into the fun. So again, I do want to thank the full Board of Education. They've been fully engaged in this process, asking questions both at the public meetings, but also throughout the whole process of developing the budget, and also just every member of the Trumbull Public Schools especially the number of the administrators and program leaders, department chairs who really get involved with the development of this budget. I have the fortune of standing here and presenting it, but it truly is a lot of us who work to put this together to make this this budget work. I also do want to thank Ms. DeSoro. She also was very engaged in the process, as she always has been, asks a lot of detailed questions before she has to put out her budget. I very much appreciate the fact that she did put forth a 4% budget for the Board of Education. Well, there'll be a slide in here that talks about the gap between the Board of Education and her budget. I'm very much appreciative of the fact that she was able to put the 4% in there. Certainly, in the time that I looked back, I don't see any other 4% requests. So I truly appreciate her understanding of where we are and the needs. So with that, just getting into this, I mentioned there's a lot of folks that build this budget. You're probably well aware of our mission, but we certainly do strive to work in partnership with the community, which means all of you folks here tonight, but also certainly our family. When we build these budgets, we do really think about being reflective and future ready, and we try to prioritize. I kept thinking about Alice in Wonderland when I went for a walk this morning, and the Cheshire Cat who said, if you don't know where you're heading, it doesn't really matter which way you go. But we absolutely know where we're trying to head, so we know exactly where we're trying to go here. And we are definitely results oriented, and Ms. McHugh just listed some of the results that we have had. I'll go over some of our academic results as well. And our board meeting on March 12th will go over all kinds of mid-year results from iReady. Dr. Iwaniki will do that. We have three major goals for the Board of Education. We always have a physical, social, emotional well-being set of goals. We always have optimizing and teaching and learning, because that's what we do. And then we always want to make sure we're looking at operational excellence and continuous improvement. We have a whole district improvement plan on our website. We have mid-year and final updates that are fairly lengthy. So if anybody ever wants to know what's happening in the Trumbull Public Schools, you can go onto our website, look at our goals, and you can see what we've accomplished. I do put that in my monthly updates when it's appropriate, and it focuses on the sub-goals that belong to this. We also passed a vision of a graduate a couple of years back by the board. Unanimous support for that. You can see what we're trying to accomplish with our students. We work with kids from 3 years old to 22. Not everybody always understands that, but that is our full scope of students. From once they turn 3, if they are in the child find and birth to 3 says they're ours, they come to us. Dr. Wheeler has a lot to do at the beginning, and then they go all the way through, some of them all the way until 22 years old, and a lot of them are potentially in our elite program when they're at that particular, which is also a very successful program. The key factors in our planning this year, we've been talking about the fact that ARP ESSER funding is ending. I see some districts around us who it looks like the cliff was large, very large. We, from the beginning, when we started putting the money for ARP ESSER, we even talked about landing the plane. We talked about tapering the money down, and that's what we've been doing all along. So we knew it was coming to an end, and this is the last budget request that has to move some of the positions into, or at least the request is to move the positions back into the operating budget. We know the families move into Trumbull in part for education, and you know that houses get purchased quite quickly, and house prices across the state are quite high. We have increase in operating costs. We know that transportation, insurance, our text, all these inflation-based items continue to nag us just like they nag us in our home budgets. Legislative mandates are for surely out there, and they're meeting right now, and I can't wait to see what they're planning on for us this year. But we have science of reading still knocking at our door. You know, we had to focus on kindergarten entry age, financial literacy, and some work on post-secondary education where they actually changed the date when kids get out of education, like right before the school year started. And that cost some districts a ton of money. It actually did not impact us very much because we have the elite program. So some of the things that we've worked collectively on have really benefited our overall spending, but more importantly, our students. these are a slide I did do this. I put a lot of time when I talked to the Board of Ed about this. Excess cost reimbursement, which I believe Board of Finance members are pretty knowledgeable about. We get money back for every special ed student if we spend 4.5 times our net cost. That's about $82,000. So once we spend over $82,000 on a child, the money that we spend over the excess, we get back from the state. We're supposed to be 100%. You can see up here, they told it was going to be 85, but it's more like 70%. They put the money in a big pot at the state. We tell them what we spent, and then they divvy it up proportionally. That's how it goes. Although they did change some of the rules where now cities get even a higher percentage than that 85. So I've been working with our representatives to say, can you please get that back to where it needs to be? Another big thing, we've been hearing and we've been seeing that when we get to the end of the year, our salary line item tends to be more in it than expected. So we've really been working hard to look at our staff turnover account, and that $750,000 is a pretty significant increase from last year's. So we're recognizing that we have some money in the salary account at the end of the year, and we took it as a credit or savings, basically reducing the budget by saying this. And Mr. Cella, Mr. Hendrickson have spent a lot of time trying to make sure they get a Goldilocks number in there, because it is hard. You cannot pinpoint it in October, and we still get retirements even into the summer. So, and then you hire people and you're not sure exactly what you're going to hire them at, but that's a number that we're comfortable with. Medical insurance, there is a bit to talk about. I think you guys are going to have some questions about medical insurance potentially. I will tell you, we've been working with the state folks. 2 years ago, we left the state partnership plan. When we did that, we actually saved over the past 2 years about $1.4 million. So it was the right move to get out of the state partnership plan for us at the time. It now appears that both on a short-term and a long-term basis, that getting back into the plan makes the most sense. Had a lot of conversations with Ms. Tesoro about that too. Met with Sean Scanlon, who's the state comptroller, and their insurance people. I've got a meeting with the unions next week, so none of this is finalized. But financially speaking, and from apples to apples insurance coverage, there's really not much of a difference between what we have now and going to the state plan. So there shouldn't be too much argument about that. And staff did appreciate the benefits of the state partnership plan. So that's going to bring us some significant savings compared to what we originally put into the budget. I did want to point out our budget reduces for more elementary teachers. And in our budget book, it shows exactly where those positions are slated to be. So we already took that reduction, and that was based on anticipated enrollment. So we would still meet all of our guidelines with those 4 reductions. And then, of course, we include the athletics budget. Finances goes back to the board, and the pay-to-play money goes back to the board as well. We know that we're trying to maintain the staffing from the ESSER grants. I think the 8-drop-2 schedule at the high school is going generally very, very well for students. It allows kids to now have up to 32 credits before they graduate. They're required to get 25. We want to make sure they can get 28. It's not required, but we want to give a child 7 credits of classes each year. So 7 times 4 would be 28 credits. So 3 over what the state is required. We want to try to offer more technology education classes, because that's an area that's highly requested, but we don't have enough staff in that area. And there is a mandate for the class of 2027 to get a finance course before they graduate. And I know our people who are financial people here probably appreciate that kids getting a finance class before they graduate high school is a good thing. We know we have to continue. This budget, again, attempts to include the deficit we know we accrue in strings and band and elite, but it does not eliminate the pay to play. It does support the supervisor of mental health. It currently includes the THS rugby team. who I know came out quite a bit last year during your guys' meetings. A number of people spoke about that. And there is no spring sport at the middle schools. And middle school track and field is actually really a good, efficient use of sports because a lot of kids like to participate. So this would be great if we could do that. And then, of course, salaries, the contractual increases are in there, the transportation costs, and then we did have $500,000 in there for a potential late start so we could have conversations at the board level. We say the budget's lean. I tell my team the word lean and $6 million increase, 5.34%. People could argue with that, but we say lean because we didn't try to add a whole bunch of stuff. We're not trying to add all kinds of programs. This is what we have currently. So it's lean in the sense of, like I said, we're not trying to go and add all kinds of new initiatives. There are a couple of new things, but it's not significant in our minds. We know that most of our budget, and you guys know this well, salaries and benefits accounts for 91.91% of the budget. So much of our budget is people driven. And we learned through COVID that sitting behind a computer and being a kid wasn't great for learning. That we know that the teacher working with the child is what's very effective. Slide that some people don't love. I just want to point it out. I won't spend a lot of time on it, but Trumbull's down there at the 18.5. The average per pupil in our DIRG is, in Fairfield County is 23. We showed this slide last year. We're actually making some decent progress on this. We appreciated that we could add an administrator last year. We want to make sure we don't lose our supervisor of mental health, especially given all the conversations around mental health in this day and age. This slide goes back to just inflation. The blue line is unfortunately inflation. And in 22-23, inflation overtook our budget increases. We also throw the health cost because we know healthcare costs are just, through the roof in this country. But in 23-24, inflation remained over our request. But I'm hopeful that inflation's coming down and we're actually going to be able to right size where we need to be based on what Ms. Tesoro put forth in her budget this year. Last year, the board approved a 4.98. We ultimately received 3.3. We did earmark $453,000 of our non-lapsing account to help with that delta. We did have to, unfortunately, eliminate talented and gifted program. We reduced a math specialist. We had to reduce some of the high school elective options. We did eliminate elementary music teacher and some PE staffing. And we had to delay some of the technology replacement, but Jeff von Steenberg will talk more about how successful we've been this year with our technology. We wanted to try to reduce some of the pay-to-play, but couldn't, and we had to certainly delay our late school start time discussion. So therefore, what does it mean, the 4%? If we did get the 4% increase, it would be a $1.6 million we say cut or reduction from the approved Board of Education. We recognize that this would be an increase to our budget. It would be, what would you have to eliminate from the board adopted budget? We would have to start by eliminating the late school start. I'm assuming there might be some questions and conversation about that tonight. I already mentioned some conversation about the insurance costs, where we are going to see some significant savings from our original note, but that's not been completely figured out. We are hoping there's going to be some movement in that excess cost, and we would have to look at things like extracurricular activities, professional development. But in general, we believe that, again, we know when we come forward with a 5.34, that's quite an ask. We believe, especially in lieu of the insurance costs coming down that 4%, we could reasonably get this put together with minor reductions in other places. The enrollment has been pretty steady. What's interesting is we were seeing some in elementary decrease, But over the last few months, I'm actually seeing some of our class sizes at the elementary school start to go up. I have no idea. I'm not a real estate agent, but I bet you they're wondering what's going to happen as spring is about to spring and houses go on the market. I don't know what will happen because we haven't seen the interest rate cuts yet, and I don't think they're expecting now for them to occur for a few more months. But we'll see what happens. We think if a lot of houses start selling, those bigger houses that are not full with kids may start getting populated with children, which will impact our schools for sure. But I'm not a future seer, so it's hard to say exactly. These are the reductions. We show this. If you've never seen this before, it takes a little time to orient yourself. K through 5 down the left-hand side, the elementary schools across the top. I have to make these predictions back in October, November when I'm putting the budget together based on current class size. And so based on those current class sizes at the time, we decided we could eliminate 4 more elementary sections. You could see there would be an increase of 1 at Frenchtown, nothing at Booth Hill or Daniels Farm. They'd remain flat. You see the reduction of 2 sections at Jane Ryan, a reduction at Middlebrook, and 2 sections reduced at Tashua. But I am watching all these numbers and how they're changing. For example, Daniels Farm, the 86 in grade 1 turned out to be 88, which is right bouncing up against that 22 guideline. We don't have to do anything when it goes over 22, but we do start looking at it more carefully as we get to those guidelines. But this is where we reduced from the budget. So overall, these are the staffing changes that are in our budget. Reduce those 4. Reduce the special education chair, which is a teacher position. Later on, you'll see that we add it back with a required of an 092 and make it an administrator position. Mr. Catalano will talk more about that later. And you see the other positions, 2 at the high school, the 4 literacy consultants, the language arts team leader, and the English language learner. You see in the side there, 5.5 of those positions are all ARP ESSER grants funded right now. And then this additional 0.5 FTE bilingual language learning teacher. Sorry. So those are the positions we're really trying to make sure we get back. And those are all built into the budget. And then you're going to hear a lot more about coaching from Dr. Iwaniki and a couple others in a moment. She'll introduce them. But one of the things that we know is very successful in our district is about our collective team working together. That's the administrators, our teacher leaders, and then, of course, all the classroom teachers working together to try to make sure that we are pushing the flywheel in the same direction in order to get in order to help our students the most. So with that, I'm actually going to invite Dr. Iwaniki to come up here and talk about the importance of our coaches, because I think it's important for people to understand what our coaches do and how they help. Yep. Oh, I have to do this slide too. Oh, I jumped the gun. I should see that because I see actually the next slide's coming up. Forgot, you've seen this slide multiple times now. We believe that the 24-25 numbers of literacy coaches, 2 at every we want 2 literacy coaches at every elementary school except for Middlebrook and Frenchtown, which is our Title I schools. We need the extra coach there. That grant is the Title I grant paying for those, and we believe we need 1 math coach at every elementary school and 1.5 coaches at our Title I school. And without further ado, I'll now invite Dr. Iwaniki to come up to talk a little bit more about our coaching and coaching process.
Thank you. I first just want to say thank you to the Board of Finance for, as you stated in the beginning, inviting us to have significant dialogue about what's important to the town of Trumbull in education, because at the end of the day, that's what we want. And so in the past, I've been here to kind of talk about how we're using ARP and ESSER funds to invest and what those positions mean that we've used the funding for. And as that ends and we seek to put them into our board budget, tonight I've invited those positions, some people that fill those positions that have a real tie to the Trumbull community. So they're not just doing the work. Kate Ingeldrum, our ELA program leader, and Kim Lombardi, our math program leader, but they're people with significant ties to the town of Trumbull. More than I'm hired to be in Trumbull, these are people that have, I would say, in the most positive ways, live, breathe, and give to the Trumbull community, and have raised their families here. And so it's my pleasure to welcome them to give more of an insight about how these roles function here in Trumbull. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Kim Lombardi, and I am the current elementary math program leader here in Trumbull. Prior to this, I was a math specialist at Booth Hill School for 18 years. For many of those years, I juggled dual roles within our district. A mother of 3 boys receiving education in Trumbull, and they're all up there. They look like men now, they used to be little ones. And as an educator myself within the district. Okay, do I switch this? Perfect. Thanks. All right.
On that first line.
Oh, yep. I'm sorry. I'm going to back her up.
That's okay.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Kate Engeldrum. I'm the new K-5 ELA program leader. I'm here today as the proud parent from the Middlebrook school community. My first grader and second grader, as you can see in the photo there, directly benefit from the literacy and math educators at our school, as do 100% of students and staff across our district. Kim and I want to thank you for hearing from us tonight and for all you do for Trumbull.
All right, my turn again. So today, I'm here to share firsthand experiences regarding the profound impact that the literacy consultants and math specialists have had on our district students over the past 2 decades. Let's take a stroll down the Trumbull Way lane for a moment. Back in 1999, Trumbull added 2 literacy consultants in all 6 schools that have now been intervening for over 25 years. And our reading scores continue to show today how valuable these positions are and have been for our students over the years. I'm going to put my little parent PTA hat on here for a moment and kind of take you back. There's many of us in this room right now, that stood as PTA parents when all of our kids grew up together. And we attended a lot of town meetings here advocating for the addition of math specialists. And in the year 2004, Trumbull Public Schools added math specialists in all 6 elementary schools. This was a big year for me. I resigned from the Norwalk Public School System that year and accepted one of those new roles as a math specialist here in the district. My youngest son also entered kindergarten that year, so it was truly a big year. Over the course of 18 years, I worked with all students from enrichment to intervention, while also supporting staff with new curriculum initiatives, and a lot of in-house professional development, and leveled small group support, both pushing into classrooms and pulling students out of classrooms. Our math scores quickly grew, and students across the district became stronger and more confident mathematical thinkers. In the year 2020, Trumbull dramatically reduces the literacy consultants and math specialists, and the next school year was an exceptionally difficult one. As a math specialist, I split buildings that year, and the literacy consultants had to cut the number of students that they serviced by half because there was only 1 in each building that year. It was so academically challenging on all of us with the effects of COVID and reduced support. Trumbull students needed us then more than ever, and it was quickly reflected in our ELA and math scores. The year 2021. Trumbull administration, with the Board of Ed's support, recognizes the monumental value of these positions and uses the ESSER funds to reinstate the support staff to help close the achievement gap and continue to move our students forward. Today I stand here with just my educator hat on to ask that we all continue our commitment to providing the best educational resources for all our students in Trumbull. Those of you with young children deserve the same level of opportunity and support that all our children had. And this can only happen by giving the Board of Ed the full funding it needs to keep all our staff in place.
As you can see, our children benefit significantly from the literacy and math positions, supported by data indicating consistent increases in school-wide and district-wide literacy and math levels. The specialists actively collaborate with teachers, conducting regular analyses of student growth, maximizing high-leverage instructional strategies, and provide training and support for delivering strong Tier 1 instruction using research and evidence-based curriculum resources. Additionally, they work closely with classroom teachers to offer enrichment opportunities. Literacy and math support staff specialize in providing interventions and engage in cycles of regular data analysis, all while ensuring effective communication with admin, teachers, and families. We are incredibly proud of the fact that 100% of our literacy consultants have received training in structured literacy, including the Orton-Gillingham approach and the Wilson Reading System. We pride ourselves on going above and beyond, ensuring our consultants are reputable. Similarly, 100% of our math specialists have received training in the Bridges Intervention for Math program. In the context of the current discourse on teacher burnout, the Trumbull way of maintaining these important positions is an investment for Trumbull and takes a proactive approach. We provide job-embedded coaching to support teachers, contributing to teacher retention during a time when burnout is a significant concern.
Again, the impact of highly trained ELA and math support staff extends to all students. From struggling students to gifted learners, they enrich the experience for all. Personally, I've witnessed the transformative effect of this support with my youngest child, who received early reading intervention and is now thriving as a young adult. He recently graduated from the University of Delaware and is a senior consultant in New York City, identifying financial crimes for major banking institutions. And I cannot even say how proud I am of him and the hard work that he did to overcome his learning issues. But he couldn't have done it without the support that he was given. Honestly, our education system is why families move to Trumbull.
I'm sure you've all heard about the science of reading. It refers to the body of research that investigates how people learn to read and the most effective ways to teach reading. Our goal is to bridge the gap between those research findings and practical application in the classroom. Implementing evidence-based practices from the research leads to improved literacy outcomes for our students. The continuous professional learning and collaboration between the research and our educators is vital for translating the findings into effective classroom practices. Our literacy consultants are doing just that every single day.
To quickly summarize, Trumbull's commitment to investing in highly trained specialists rather than relying on costly computer programs truly sets us apart. Let's continue to prioritize the future of Trumbull's children by maintaining our investment in these invaluable specialists and ensuring that our district remains a beacon of educational excellence. Thank you.
And so we're going to close today, and I want to thank Principal Jen Newmeyer, who's here today, who can give you a million examples of successful stories here in Trumbull. I was asked by one of the students that Tasha supported to read this letter to the Board of Finance and to share her story. It says, "Dear Board of Finance, first off, thank you for your time and for allowing me to address you. My name is Catherine Marchand, and I'm currently a senior at Trumbull High School. A little more than a decade ago at Tashua Elementary School in first grade, I struggled with my reading and worked with my specialist, Mrs. Kunshaft. She implemented different reading programs, working with me for a half an hour each day until we discovered the right approach. After years of frustration, disappointment, and hard work together, we found the right system that clicked, and Mrs. Kunshaft never gave up on me. By the middle of fourth grade, I received the news that I had earned the previously unimaginable 4s on my SBACs. I'm proud to be graduating from Trumbull High School in a few months and so grateful to Mrs. Kunshaft and my teachers at Tashua Elementary School. In the fall, I will continue my academics as a first-year student at Yale University. Without the intervention specialists, this would not have been possible. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Sue.
All right. All right. She's also a fabulous runner, that kid. She's in the newspaper about her runs on the teams, on the running teams. So thank you for that, ladies. It's a little hard to follow that, but we're going to go into things about technology now after that. So I have Jeff von Steenberg here. He took over for Jeff Hackett. Jeff Hackett was a longtime technology manager in Trumbull Public Schools. So Jeff took over. I know that the Board of Finance had some concerns about just how we were making sure that we replace the technology, and we agreed. We had actually multiple conversations with some folks on the Board of Finance, and there was discussions about leasing and purchasing and how to do this the right way. So we put together a 5-year plan, and which we have copies of. We can hand out tonight. But I wanted Jeff to talk about what we've done this year in terms of implementing year 1 of the 5-year plan.
Okay, so this year, this is year 1 of the 5-year plan. This is everything that's already been either implemented or acquired. The leased equipment is 3 servers, which are production servers that we've already implemented in district. The 15 UPS batteries are 90% in the data closets. We've acquired and installed 150 desktop computers. And we've also, off of leasing, deployed the 12 administrator laptops. On the purchasing end, we piloted GX series smartboards, which are, it's a middle-of-the-road smartboard. We tested it at the high school and at the middle school to make sure it would work, and it offers us some savings. So in doing that, we were able to add an additional 1 so far smartboard. These are all in place with the exception of 10 that are scheduled to be installed. So they're already in the classrooms and installed. And then in that savings, we were also able to purchase 20 additional desktops. And that's kind of forward thinking for, if the budget is approved, the 2nd grade smartboards that we want to put in. So I'd like to get the desktops in place and in the classrooms ahead of time, so when the teachers are getting their desktops replaced over the summer, when they're not there, I'd like to put them in the classrooms, and that way, when school startup comes in the fall, their desktops are in place and their new smartboards, if we can get scheduling, are in place as well. The Chromebooks, working with digital learning and curriculum, we had a discussion, and we kind of evaluated the need for touch versus non-touch Chromebooks. And there is some need for the touch, but in a majority of it, we don't need the touch, so it's about a 30% savings. So I was able to purchase 1,075 Chromebooks. In year 1 budget, it was 920, so it's an extra 155 Chromebooks that we're able to purchase ahead. And a lot of this is kind of concentrated towards the first 2 years of the 5-year plan are classroom equipment, because that is our biggest dire need. Year 3 is when the network infrastructure is going to start to need to be replaced. So I'd like to kind of balance off the classroom equipment before we, looking forward, start having to worry about the network infrastructure, the APs and the switches.
Thank you, Jeff.
Vinny gave a thumbs up. We're all like, is that Greek? Are we okay?
Vinny was a big part of it, so.
Yes, we did work closely with Vinny and Mr. Mascola on just the whole concept of how to make this work. And so you see that we are putting that into implementation. So I look forward to being able to continue moving forward down that five-year plan. So year one is looking really strong, and if the budget continues to look the way it is, year two is going to be strong as well, and we'll be able to continue to make those purchases. So we know what happens if the budget doesn't get funded, and I can tell you that especially during COVID and when there was cuts due to some previous cuts that had to occur years ago, all that pressure really does start to fall back on the folks who are left here. And it really does become a ripple effect. Ms. Engeldrum had talked about teacher burnout. And you see that across the state and the nation with teachers leaving the profession. And those costs that get cut, or those things when staff gets cut, the cost really does go to the people who have to make it work still. And principals are a major part of that too, because they're trying to keep the climate of their building the way it needs to be. So we've been appreciative to where we are currently, and we're appreciative to where we hope to end up in 24, 25. I'm just going to go into some of the other achievement stuff. I appreciate that Ms. McHugh went through some of the some of the things that we had been successful with. But we also want to point out about some of how our investments have paid off. We thought this was a pretty important slide. We know when we look at the accountability index that there was, like it said up there was these 12 ranking figures. So it's like big picture, K-12 across the K-12, all these different measures. How are we doing? And I even saw that Ms. Tesoro put it into her letter. It said that Trumbull is the number 7 district in the state. And there it is, number 7. But when you look at how much we pay per child, you see that there's something very different than the numbers around us. You see that we're spending the 18.5 when other districts above us are spending well more than the 18.5. And as you look across the entire scheme of things, you do see a Cheshire at 19.6, and you do see a couple of you see an 18.782 at Bethany, which is part of regional district. I think it's part of the Woodbridge district, right? So in any event, we believe that we're being very efficient with the money that we're provided. We do think carefully about how we deploy our resources, and I think this is another slide that shows we found success and we're able to use the money we have to do that. I'm going to now turn it over to and we are rounding the corner, if you're wondering. You see it in your packet that we're coming to the end of our presentation. So I'm going to have Mr. Catalano talk to you a little bit more about the pupil personnel services requests, and then we can, of course, answer a number of questions.
All right, thank you very much for having me, and thank you for allowing me to present these few slides. I do talk quick, so we'll get to this pretty quickly, and then, of course, I can answer any questions. Sometimes the PPS budget can be sort of nebulous with unexpected costs and legislation. But we really try to, I use the word mitigate, might not be the most, the best term when you talk about finances, but we try to mitigate those costs through certain actions from our department. So I'll go over those a little bit as well. So Dr. Semmel alluded to the staffing requests, which are both administrative positions. The mental health supervisor is currently fully funded by grants, ARP, ESSER, and IDA funds. For the 24-25 school year, we are looking for the Board of Education to have an allocation of that 0.51, and the 0.49 will continue to be funded by IDEA funds. The 1.0 FTE of the Supervisor of Elementary Special Education is in lieu of the 1.0 FTE Elementary SRP Department Chair. And the justification behind this is we have 6 elementary schools, we have 7 specialized resource program classrooms, almost 400 students, and almost 50 certified staff members. So and without any bona fide administrator in position to actually ensure that we're complying with both federal and state statute, to ensure that we have supervisory and evaluation systems in place in conjunction with the building-based administrators. So that is really the justification for that position. There were no requests in this budget for certified staff positions or for non-certified staff positions, with the caveat that, of course, with non-certified positions, which includes our paraeducators, that's really contingent on IEPs and ensuring we have enough staff to actually implement all of the IEPs that require that level of service. So that's a bit of a dynamic number. And I actually have a few slides about paraeducators, just because that seems to be where I get a lot of questions. So hopefully this will help to demystify a little bit about the paraeducators here in Trumbull. So just some nuts and bolts about paraeducators. So paraeducators are of course, essential staff for the delivery of instruction under IDEA, along with our special education teachers and our related service providers. As far as our paraeducators, sorry, I know there was a question behind me. So, as far as our paraeducators, we also have a specialized cohort of paraeducators that have an applied behavior analysis training, and those are the paraeducators that work in our specialized resource program with students that are on the autism spectrum. Requests for paraeducators in district are actually quite minimal. I can count on one hand how many actual requests we get from our staff. The vast majority of our increases in paraeducator support are due to, at least since I've been here, are due to actual move-ins. So students move in from out of state, or they move in from an out of town in Connecticut with an IEP that has that level of support, in which we have to comply with, of course. So that's where we're seeing why we need to increase that level of support. And just really quickly, only the PPT can recommend paraeducator support. So it's not an administrative action except in emergency circumstances. It's only that body that can actually recommend that support as part of a student's individualized education plan, or IEP. So we have close to 190 paraeducators, at least when we proposed this budget and it was approved. So where are these paraeducators? 100, almost 200 staff members. We have, it's almost 20% of our total staff. We have about 1,000 staff in Trumbull, so close to 20%. So I wanted to create this table just to kind of show what the allocation looks like. Where are our paraeducators here in Trumbull Public Schools? So we could see the vast majority of our paraeducators are actually shared paras. So they're supporting students in the classrooms with their students with disabilities, with their typical peers, which is exactly where we want them to be as much as possible. So you can see almost 103 paraeducators are allocated for that purpose. We have about 30 one-to-one paraeducators doing that more highly specialized instruction individually with students. And then we have 57 ABA paras, which are mostly in our specialized resource programs at TechEC, Middlebrook, and Frenchtown. Of course, added district placements are a good portion of my budget, about $5.4 million for the approved Board of Ed budget, and so of a $20 million budget. So it's quite a large proportion. So why is that? What's the reasoning behind it? So this kind of captures really the reasoning. So as far as the increases year over year, which we have seen substantial increases in tuition, especially with the ongoing inflation crisis, next year's costs won't be sent out to the spring, so we kind of go off the tuition from the prior year. We kind of bake in a 6% increase. Many students are increasingly needing more highly specialized programs, especially students that are medically fragile or have profound developmental delays. So we are seeing an increase in that. And those more highly specialized programs do cost more money. A lot of times their services are a la carte. So if they need a nurse to be a one-to-one nurse, that would be part of their planning on top of the tuition. So you have to actually pay for both. Of course, a lot of that is captured in excess cost. As far as the enrollment, we're looking at about 43 students, which is approximately what we have right now for added district placement. We have about almost 1,100 students with disabilities. So I don't know, it's 4% of our students require added district placements. But again, that is a PPT decision, and that is where we can actually implement the IEP, which of course is what we consider a free and appropriate public education for that student. So, with all the unexpected kind of hurdles with PPS and with legislation, certain mandates. So what can we kind of do to kind of offset that? So I created this slide to kind of talk about what we do here in Trumbull Public Schools and what we continue to do. So of course, Dr. Samuel alluded to the elite post-secondary program. Again, this is and of course, Next Chapter Books is a job training platform over on Daniels Farm Road. So if we didn't have this program, just some numbers here, is out of a district placement for one of these for a student would be approximately $100,000 without transportation. So we have 27 students. We actually had 30 students, but I'm happy to announce that 3 of those students did gain employment here in Trumbull. So I just want to plug that in because that made my year. So that was fantastic. So we have 27 students now. But again, that does offset the cost of out of district placement, and also this did mitigate that legislation in which. In the past, we had to educate a student up until their 22nd birthday. With that legislation, as of July 1st, 2023, we had to educate students for the full year in which they turned 22 up until June 30th. So if you're born on July 2nd, we would actually be, we would have to, that would be at the board's cost for that tuition, for that out-of-district placement, as opposed to that aging out on July 2nd. So hopefully that clarifies how that affected the district. Minimally, though, due to elite. As far as effective use of continuous services, it's not just elite. We also have our REACH program, which is our therapeutic day program over on the Madison campus. That is at capacity right now. That is one of the reasons why that our mental health supervisor is such a critical asset, because that really helps to ensure we have the appropriate robust programming there for these students. And again, that does allow us to program for more students in district as opposed to outplacing in therapeutic day programs. And again, the specialized resource program is the same thing for our students at the elementary and pre-K levels. For our students on the autism spectrum, we are able to provide that specially designed, individualized instruction in those programs, again, offsetting costs. And the most important to me about this is that as opposed to outplacing students, because we have this continuous services, they do have that inclusionary programming. We can have students go to gym. They can go to the library. We can mainstream those students. So that is incredibly important as far as our ability to program appropriately and to the greatest extent with typical peers in Trumbull Public Schools. And this lastly, some revenue generating initiatives. REACH accepts referrals. So we have tuition from neighboring districts. Right now we have, we're partnering with Monroe. And then we're currently looking to do the same thing with Elite. So we're looking to actually enroll students from other districts for tuition, which can help to offset some of the costs of these programs. And of course, we have the Next Chapter Books, which is our bookstore. So we do gain revenue from that store as well, which offsets the cost of that program. So I believe, yep. All right. Thank you.
Right, our last 2 slides really. So our final thoughts and then summary is just, we know that teaching and learning is highly dependent on people. So we know that our budget is really about the staff, and it's staff intensive. Majority of our budget pays for that, for people. I believe we've been very transparent around our ARP ESSER grant. We've been clear from the beginning how we were going to spend it and how we were going to taper down. As a district, we've been using lagging and leading data to try to help us identify what we need to do as next steps to continue to improve our instructional program. And I believe that our budget focuses on our priorities. Our Trumbull students are achieving at high levels, and we believe that we can see in the data that our opportunity gaps are being eliminated. In fact, today I just saw, I think it was a note from Mr. Manuel, where Trumbull High School's enrollment in the UConn ECE program went up to 303 or 330 students, and third in the states. We have the third highest number of students taking UConn ECE classes. And I say that as part of eliminating opportunity gaps, because when we offer these college level classes for all of our students, we have a whole group of kids now who can take these courses. So we're just really proud of our students, but it starts by making sure we provide the opportunity for them, making sure it's there. So again, I'm just going to close with the mission statement. I'm not going to read it to you, but we do believe our budget request is student-focused, needs-driven, and supports our mission and vision for our students. And of course, we're happy to answer the set of questions that may be coming our way next. But I do want to thank you for your attention. That went a little bit longer than I anticipated, but so I appreciate you for listening and paying attention during the time.
I actually thought that went pretty smoothly. I will start with some questions. I have just a couple of quick things before I open it up to the rest of the board. Dr. Iwaniki, I wanted to ask some specific questions about TAG. These came from concerns that were expressed by parents. I did, as part of, gearing up for the budget season, we were invited to meet with some of the PTA representatives, and they had some interesting comments about the elimination of the TAG program and our enrollment numbers at the elementary level. So first of all, I want to say that it is sad to me that we don't have a TAG program in place. I don't feel that it was a huge loss last year because we had one TAG teacher for the entire district at that point, and it was no longer a really, in my opinion, a viable program. We had it as a placeholder at that point. I do think there's a misunderstanding about how interventions. I actually kind of think about when you talk about the tiered interventions that talented and gifted, or those who excel academically, that actually is like a tier 4 intervention. It should be on the spectrum. They're kids with special needs, just like kids who are struggling. So for me, that's really important that people understand that they are being serviced. I know that the state mandates that we have certain things to make sure that our kids who are struggling are taken care of, and those are protected things, but we don't not service these students, is my understanding, and I want to make sure that we talk about that just a little bit. We no longer level classes. You don't have, the advanced math group and reading groups in that formal sense. But can you just touch on that just a little bit so people understand?
Sure, thank you. The teachers in our schools have a wide range of abilities to differentiate for students. And in addition, they can work with literacy and math specialists in our tiered intervention or our multi-tiered systems of support. So if a student needed to have an extension, they could work with the teacher to say, for example, maybe the reading that they're doing is a little less complex than they're able to do. A teacher can provide a book that's at their level or an extension of a project. And if the teacher doesn't know quite what to choose from, I know in math sometimes the math team has been really wonderful at putting together what are some enrichment and gifted activities they can do. The program that we did have in place for TAG was more about the TAG students accessing what it means to be a gifted student and doing leadership projects in the second year around those gifts. So they weren't actually previously receiving a what they call an accelerated program through TAG. Any acceleration that we've provided since I've been here anyway, the last 3 years, has really been from our classroom teachers who do an amazing job at really making sure that our kids are challenged and who pride themselves in having high expectations for all of their students.
How do other districts who have classic TAG programs or ATP programs in place provide that? What does something? What is the value of that we're missing?
So I think it depends on the district. I'm not familiar with all districts' programs. I know that in the 5 districts that I've worked in, only one of them has offered any kind of acceleration. Most of them identify, but then rely on classroom teachers to provide the extension. There are ways in which you could have pull-out programs where students do extension types of activities, but then they miss classroom instruction during that time. So with the limited time during the day, it's tough to have a program that's going to accelerate without also missing something that might be happening in the classroom. One might argue that the stuff that's happening in the classroom the student has already mastered, so that might not be important. But those are roads that really differ by district and by population, and I wouldn't be able to say what we're missing per se. I can only say that I believe that what Trumbull is doing right now is still offering people extension. Where I think parents might miss something is in the child understanding what it means to be gifted. And I have to compliment our talented and gifted staff. I know Mrs. Malloy, who's here tonight, who was a part of that, in addition to Kathy Huffman, really worked on gifted children understanding their own mentality in different situations. And many of the people have said, you really helped me to access my leadership, or you really have to help me to understand that I don't have to have the right answer all the time. So for example, sometimes a gifted student might know the answers and become frustrated with other students that don't know those answers, or they get really disappointed with themselves if they don't know them because they're used to knowing them. And she'd work with them on those different aspects of being a gifted child and show them how they can turn that into a leadership opportunity.
Thank you. Also, in talking about enrollment numbers, one of the things that parents had very much talked about is that the large class sizes at the elementary level. I remember the days when they were much higher than they are now. Would you just comment, please, a little bit on the difference between what the contract numbers are and the guidelines, and what the current guidelines are? I'm looking across at the numbers for next year in your enrollment, and this is the first time in several years that I don't see multiple grades in danger of bumping into the next or requiring more. You have Jane Ryan at grade 4, which looks like you're at 25, 25, and 24. That's one that I would put as an orange, that there's potential that you might need an extra there should you have 2 move-ins. You're closer to our guidelines at 25. And none of the other classes in that grade level across the board sit quite as high in that enrollment. Tashua grade 5 is similarly positioned at 25, 24, and 24, and their kindergarten numbers are at 20, 20, and 20. So, I think there's 3 areas where I looked at your decreased in 4. Nothing looks egregious to me, but I just wanted to know how, where those guidelines are, where they are currently, and to do that, because there's a perception that we're overcrowded in our classrooms at the elementary level right now.
I'm going to let Dr. Summel speak to that because he has more information around the current numbers as well.
Yeah, I think what we heard this year a little bit is that some of our kindergarten numbers were not as, I think I heard like equitable across the grade. So we had some of our elementary schools that might have had 16 or 17 students in a kindergarten class. And I heard from some Daniel Farms parents where the class sizes were in that 21, 22. So that's pretty much the feedback we heard. Going into the actual numbers, like I alluded to quickly, when I look at our enrollment, now this is slightly different than my predictions. So I'm looking at I have to pay attention to the current K over at Daniel's Farm because they're actually at 4 sections of 22 each. It was 86, I believe, when I put the budget together, but it's actually at 88 now. So I do have to keep paying attention to that one. That's changed a little bit. Middlebrook, also, their
When you say current, that's this year. So that kindergarten
current
will be
grade.
your first grade for next year.
Yeah, it'd be my first grade for next year.
So
Yeah.
the guidelines for 1 through 3
Yep, K through 2 is 22.
is 20. So but kindergarten used to be at 20.
Yes, it used to be at 20.
Okay.
Well, as I had mentioned a few years back, we were actually running out of space, in particular at Middlebrook. There was an issue at Middlebrook and Booth Hill. When I first came here, I kept hearing from Booth Hill parents that art was on a card, and this was not fair. And it was also at Middlebrook was getting quite tight. So the 22 helped with space issues. The Middlebrook's grade 1 did jump up. So in the book over there would be grade 2 in the future book. So they're at 88 children right now. So I have to continue to pay attention to that school. And then Tashua's 4th grade currently, based on March 1 enrollment, was 74. And I know all these principals probably know exactly what their numbers are, but these are the numbers that I got from the March 1st enrollment numbers. So we have to pay attention to those 3 sections. But there can be ebbing and flowing throughout the entire year. So some of those might come down. So I don't personally get overexcited if we bump up against a guideline and go over by 1. That's not a time to spend $80,000 because you go over by a guideline by 1 student. It's a time to watch. It's a time to pay attention. But for me, to spend $80,000, it has to be something significant. A guideline doesn't say a mandatory, if it goes over this, you must. Because the contract, you asked about the contract, I don't have it in front of me, but I believe it's, 28 is the maximum that you can put into a classroom.
Okay.
And that's K. 25 kindergarten is in the contract. So 25 kindergarten and 28 across the board, which we don't think is great education. We would certainly try to avoid 28 students in an elementary school classroom.
Which is why our guidelines are
Right.
right. So, Scott has a follow-up to question to that. Okay. The other
Oh, that was it. Okay.
the other piece in the enrollment numbers and then the reductions of FTEs, you talked about music and PE.
Yeah.
My understanding always is that PE and music is based on the enrollment. Is that reduction based on enrollment?
The last year's it was. So we in our current budget for our proposed budget for 24-25 does not seek to eliminate any additional UAs. But
Right.
the year before, we had seen some reductions in the elementary sections. Myself, Dr. Iwaniki, Mr. Cella, and others, we were really trying to find an efficient way to dole out music and PE teachers because it gets complicated as sections go from 22 to 23. You have to make sure that there's enough of a PE teacher available for that district. And actually, Ms. Heffley was a big part of that as well. So we saw that we could make a reduction to the elementary music. Now, if you went to some of our board meetings, you would have seen that not everybody agreed.
No, but I wanted people to know it wasn't a position was eliminated because of budget constraints. It was based on enrollment.
No, we had to find a reduction. We had seen that there was some efficiencies we could take in that areas. So we took
But
the
all of the kids
reduction.
got PE, all the kids got music. That's
And
what I wanted to make sure.
We saw that we could do it and still make sure everybody got the PE and the music that they were used to getting. Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Follow up to PPTs and move-ins. You stated that move-ins, and when they come with an IEP, how soon after a student moves into district do they have a Trumbull IEP or a PPT meeting?
We have to have the PPT to review the plan, the IEP, within 30 days. So if a student moves in from another district or definitely another state, then we comply by that IEP, and then we kind of ascertain how they're responding to that environment, and then within 30 days we have to have a PPT to review and to revise that IEP.
And do you find that sometimes they come with an elevated level of service requirement and that it changes based on how Trumbull services students, or how do you feel that?
Well, I think that there's a continuum. I think that some students come in with that don't have incredible amount of services, but then we do have students that move in that do require one-to-one paraeducator support, students that do require placement in a specialized resource program. So we see a continuum, but it's when you have the one-to-one. So the tricky part is when you have a one-to-one on an IEP, it's very hard not to actually to hire for that position. If it's shared, my principal colleagues over there do a very good job of kind of utilizing their shared pairs very efficiently. But when there's a one-to-one, that's basically almost a guaranteed hire unless someone else goes down in support.
And just to touch on the graduation requirements, the change in the ADROP 2 schedule and the graduation requirements, the fact that kids could have 28 credits, that's a great thing. I think the graduation requirements and the changes were to allow for more in the foreign language and arts as well. And we're meeting those needs now, correct?
Yes, so to get the 25 credits, the minimum to graduate, absolutely. And yes, the ADROP 2 provides more opportunity for kids to take all those elective courses, right? To really expand whether they want to take a business class or a music class or an art, there's so many different classes we offer there. But yes, we're meeting it. But one of the things that we noticed is that we just have more children taking, being in 2 study halls than we want. That extra technology teacher and personal finance teacher should get us to about each child having 1 study hall per day. And we actually don't have a problem with 1 study hall per day because that gives kids a chance to catch up on things and do what they need to do. And if that study hall ends up being the first period of the day, they could have also a late arrival if they're old enough, if they meet the age requirement, stuff like that.
Excellent. And my last thing, science of reading. In last year's budget, it was talked about in science of reading that it was a mandate that was coming down. There were a lot of districts that were filing for waivers. Can you please just explain where we are in that process? Where does Trumbull sit and what the actual cost to implement are if we have to, just based on science of reading?
Right. So the good news is, and I'm going to let Dr. Iwanicki also chime in, so I'll just do like the high level piece, and if you want more. So the legislation says that by July 1st, 2024, we have to begin implementation. I would tell you, and Ms. Engeldrum would say the same, and Dr. Iwanicki would say the same, we've already begun implementation. So for July 1st, 2024, we are in a good spot. But for July 1st, 2025, we have to be in like full implementation. And so in order to do that, we actually have some meetings happening, and there's been a lot of conversations about what that's going to take to get to that spot. And I think there's also a lot of moving parts. We know that there's a lot of pushback from districts. We wonder if there's going to be any legislative changes over the next year. So we want to make sure we're paying attention to the multifaceted approach. For me and for us, we want to make sure we're providing the best reading program possible for our kids, all kids, to be able to learn how to read. Like, that's what we're trying to do. So this is not necessarily about the legislation or anything. We want to make sure we have a program that's highly effective for all kids, which means it has to be adaptable. In terms of costs, I don't have a number right now for July 1st, 2025 based. We have some meetings, like I said, coming up. I don't know if you can answer anything in addition.
Yeah, I would just say in terms of the process that we started this summer and looking at all of our K through 3 curriculum with the Reading League's rubric around the science of reading to revise and see what it's missing and make updates to it. And we were able to use different grant funding and other sources to get some of decodables and tools and things that teachers could use. We instituted this year the DIBELS Universal Assessment, which is very linked to the data needed in order to implement lessons around the science of reading. And we've had some really high quality professional development. And I want to give a big shout out to Kate Engeldrum, who's been excellent with that. But when we add all that to what we're already doing, we're also seeing that our teachers are saying this is a lot because they're still doing what they always did, but they're also doing DIBELS and all these other things. And so just recently, Kate and I put together, and Kate has disseminated and made sure that she worked with the literacy coaches, key questions with that the teachers in our community that are teaching K through 3 and now K through 5 could answer about how they feel about the resources that they're using and how they feel it's meeting students' needs, so that they can say which parts are really meeting students' needs, accelerating maybe for students, and which ones are slowing them down, to see if the need, because we want to look at not just what is state mandated, but what do we believe in Trumbull is best for Trumbull students. And so we've already put those steps in place. When we look at the preliminary budget numbers for some of the top programs, they're $500,000 or more. So they're not cheap. We do have some right to read grant funding that we were able to ascertain this year that we have to make sure we spend by December of 2024. So that's the other reason why we're surveying staff, putting committees together, doing the research, vetting programs. Those are all things that we have in place right now so that we can continue. If we did nothing, as Dr. Summel said, we would be in compliance, but we want to make sure that we're providing the best and we're also not overwhelming teachers at the same time.
Perfect. So what I'm hearing is you guys are on track to do what needs to be done if that became the law. And last year and the year before, you talked a great deal about the budgetary impact of that. But it looks like you guys are already getting the pieces in place. It is a lot of work. My daughter works in another place where they've changed the curriculum many times. I understand the level of work. I'm really happy to hear that. I was I was afraid that we were going to see a large chunk of this budget that was dedicated just to that. So it sounds like you guys have kind of mitigated that.
I can't
in some
promise
ways.
that won't be in the future though, because we do need to implement in 2025, but I would say that we are in a good position. And as Dr. Summel alluded, we also don't know where the legislation is taking us. I know that I think our whole team would agree that slow is better than quick. And so we want to, if we can, do it in conscious steps that involve our staff. That's the way we'd like to approach this. And that would mean spreading the cost over time as well, if we can. We just don't know how easily we'll be able to do that. It all depends on a little bit on the legislation as well. I don't know if you want to add anything, Dr. Summel.
Okay. I'm going to go from the Board of Finance then over to the Finance Committee. I'll come across, start with Marty.
Good evening, everyone. Great presentation and congratulations on all your success. It's very impressive and great for Trumbull. I'm going to hit on some financial issues. I want to understand a little bit better. You talked about the insurance and you had budgeted 10% and you're going to switch. You built 10% into the budget. What is the expected savings? What's best case savings?
We don't have that finalized yet, but we're getting closer. I can tell you that we're probably in a range. I think we're in a range of like $750,000, but it might be a little north of that.
Okay. 750 to $1 million, somewhere in that range.
Yep, correct.
Okay. On the chart where you show the student population, now I know this year it looks like for the first time we're going down by maybe 80 students. I know it's roughly flat. It would be helpful if you could, on that chart also, show the number of teachers and the number of paras, for the same period of time, right? So I just want to make sure we understand that and how we've invested in this. And so the population has been roughly constant. Now it's going down, but I just want to make sure we understand how many teachers and how many paras associated. So if you could just update that chart with those set of numbers. And I think if you could do that every year going forward, I think that would just be helpful.
I think we could probably safely say we can go back a couple of years.
That's fine.
Because that chart covers like 5 years in the past. I wouldn't be comfortable going that far back.
Okay.
And
Go 4 years, 3 or 4 years, whatever you can easily
Yeah.
do. I don't want to create a lot of work. I do want to understand it a
Yeah,
little bit.
I understand what you'd be looking for there.
Okay, and then you're right. I don't like that other chart with regard, but you know, and last year we talked about not doing it. The reason I say that is because I think it confuses people. I think it confuses people a lot. You know, so when I looked at this hard, I think it's clear districts that have more students generally have a lower cost per pupil, and districts that have a single high school generally have a lower cost per pupil. So what I would ask, if you're going to show that chart, I'd ask that you also show what does our teacher pay compared to those surrounding towns? You know, because the implication is that we're not investing in education similarly to other towns. So that means either our teachers are making less money, it means we don't have enough teachers, our class sizes are out of whack with other places. So if you're going to show a piece of the data, I'd ask that you really kind of show all the data. Right, something's different in terms of how these are constructed. So I thought we weren't going to get into this, so I just would ask that you'd show that. I want to make sure our teachers are compensated at least equal to other towns, and I hope that's the case. And I would imagine our class sizes are roughly comparable to other towns. My belief is we have a lower cost per pupil because we have a single high school and we have a lot of students and we're more efficient, naturally more efficient. But if there's other factors in play that justify a higher investment, I want to make sure we understand it. But that type of number, I think, it leaves people with an impression that we're not investing aggressively in education, and I don't believe that to be the case. So if you can add, is that reasonable that you could add that data?
I think we can. Yeah, that's why a couple of years ago, because of the statements you've made in the past, we brought out the few districts that are large like us, and Glastonbury ended up being one of those examples. So we were able to kind of demonstrate where we were in comparison.
It was
to
one,
Glastonbury.
right? I'm just saying if our teachers are underpaid or our class sizes are out of whack, we should address that.
No, I think our teachers are not underpaid. I think our class sizes are not out of whack.
Okay.
And I think my purpose of showing that slide is that we believe we're being very efficient with the money.
Let me ask you then, why, if those two aren't the case, what would explain why our per pupil is $6,000 lower? Our teachers are getting paid the same, and our class sizes are the same. Why is it that that number is so radically different then?
We can look at certain things like that, but some districts, I'll give you one example of something that we've been talking a lot about, world language in the elementary schools.
How much does that account for?
It would be well, it's not going to be $6,000 per child kind of thing, but that's an example of something we don't do here in Trumbull. You know,
I think it would be just helpful to build up then, right? If you're going to help us understand what the other districts are doing that we're not, I literally don't understand it. So I hear the number. I don't think it's a good comparison, but if there's something that we're not doing that the others are doing, you know, and you can size that for us, I think it's useful. If you can, I just don't think it's a very helpful chart.
Yeah,
I think
we maybe could take like a New Canaan that was up on the list, like paying $6,000 more per.
do our whole DIRG, right?
Yeah.
Do the whole DIRG. You're showing we're at the bottom of those. So what is everybody doing that we're not?
Right. Well, that's hard to capture. You'd have to do a full analysis to really get into that. So that is not something we're going to be able to do. But off the top of my head, and I'm sure they're probably thinking, say this, say that. But
No, I'd like to understand it.
I
better.
also just want to caveat that no teacher is paid enough, so that's not whether or not we're talking in comparison
we're
to other
talking
districts.
My
relative.
daughter would absolutely
Relativity.
second that.
Yes.
My-
No teacher is paid
She's
enough.
definitely not paid enough. I
Right.
agree with that.
So listen, all our goal is just to make sure people recognize that we are not over-resourced, and that
Yeah.
when you look at us, when you look at that number, you can say, yeah, I've asked the state, I know this is going to come up by the Board of Finance. Is this the best apples to apples comparison you can make? Yes, it's the best apples to apples comparison. Recognizing it's not perfect. We've talked about that before.
Well, I'll move on. On the previous years, on the salary line item, I know we had significant surplus built into the salary line item, and I think what I heard you say is this year you're going to adjust $750,000 out of that line item. Is that what I understood you saying?
Yeah, well, we didn't build in excessive into the salary line items. It turned out every time we were getting to the end of the year, the salary line item continued to have more money than we had expected.
Did we have higher turnover?
We
What
believe
did that?
we believe that the turnover numbers that were being put into previous budgets were not high enough, not aggressive enough. And so as we were looking at it, we increased ours by how much this year? Was it 150? Did we go from 6? I think in the year previous, we had $600,000 in the staff turnover. So we, looking at all the numbers that have been, number of folks who've been retiring over a period of time, we predict that 750,000 is the right number.
Oh, so you're not increasing it by 750, you're only increasing it by 150.
150.
But wasn't it the last year? Here's what's confusing me, right? My understanding is the last 2 years, that line item has been over by over $1 million. Right. So if that's true, and so you can come back with the data. I'm not asking for an answer right now,
Right.
but my understanding is over the last 2 years, that line item has been over by over $1 million. And so if you're only taking another 150, you know, it seems to me you should be taking, you know, closer to an incremental million than an incremental 150. So if you could come back and help us understand that a little bit better, that's puzzling to me.
Do you have any specifics on that, Paul, right now? We can come back with more for
Okay.
sure.
Well, what we do to project the salary costs, we take the current staff that we have and roll it over, given their raises and their step increases, and build that into the budget. And this is a roughly 20-page document in detail, broken down by line item. And we take the staff that we have and build that into next year's budget.
And the other thing I want to add is that some things that can happen, and I believe it happens in your guys' budget as well. Sometimes you're not able to find a particular position. And so we happened to find a few times in the previous years, like we had to hire a psychology consultant. So the cost of that particular FTE ends up being in a consultant line item, which could be $150,000.
Totally fair.
And so when we ended up balancing the budget at the end of the year, we did have to make some transfers out of the.
Totally fair.
Right.
So I guess my ask is if you could just do for the last 2 years, analyze the salary line item, because my understanding is, as I looked at the numbers, is that it's been over by, even though you're taking 600, there was still another million on top of that. And so I hear you. If you had to move some to a consultant, it wasn't $1 million, it was 300, 500,000 or whatever it is. It would be helpful to understand that a little better. And just do the last 2 years, I think is plenty sufficient. Can you went through something a little quickly for me. I didn't quite catch it. And I get a little confused on the initials. So the ECR percentages.
Yeah.
Can you talk what is budgeted now and what was off? And then the other ECS number, is that on your side or it's not on our side?
ECS goes to the town.
Okay, so okay, I'll leave that for another discussion. I know that's significantly better than hoped. I think a lot of the lobbying, that's good news. It sounds like we're doing better. Thank you for doing that. But can you explain the ECR piece for me one more time?
Yes. Well, the three of us could explain it. Do you want to explain it, Dean? It lives in Dean's world.
Getting a little late to
Dean's
do
world.
formulas. So
No, not the formula, just the percentage,
The percentage?
differences in what's being budgeted. I got
so
the 4.5 times and understand that part.
yeah, it was originally budgeted initially, I believe 2.5 million, and what ended up happening is that this year it came. We budgeted for 0.85% of that reimbursement over the NCEP. What ended up happening is that when we got our reimbursement this year, it was actually below last year, which was 0.72%. It was like 0.69%. So we're like, we can't in good faith do a 0.85 reimbursement rate for 24-25. So we used the 0.69 based on the number of claims that we expect for next year, and that's how we had that $500,000 reduction
And
to
were
that
you
line
saying
item.
the reasons? I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to make sure I understand it. Are you saying the reason for that is the state puts a certain amount of money there, and
Yes.
then it's divvied up, and you thought you were going to get a certain percentage, but there wasn't as much money, so you got a lower percentage? Is that what happened?
That's 100% correct.
And state statute was passed for this school year, saying that, and they broke it up into 3 tiers. I don't want to get into too much complexity, but Trumbull was supposed to get 85% of the money.
But they had less money, so you got 0.6.
So we got 0.69.
Okay.
And when we received that, we certainly couldn't be budgeting for 0.85 in good faith for next year.
Okay, thank you for that. Last two questions. All right, Lenny. I'm going to talk a little bit about start times. I noticed as you were going through your goals, one of the primary goals was the health of the children. And it seems every medical group in the country says high school start time should be at 8:30. So if the primary goal of our group is the health of our children, I guess I just don't understand why is it that 8:30 wasn't even targeted, 8 o'clock was targeted. Can you just speak to that? If our primary goal is the health of our children, why aren't we targeting what every medical group in the country says that high school should start at 8:30?
Well, I would say that really comes down to a Board of Education decision and discussion about that. So I'm not going to speak for the full board because at this point they haven't even voted on whether or not they want to move forward to a late school start. When you look at the number, I mean, when you phrase it that way, if you care about the health of kids, it's like if you care about apple pie and grandmas, then you wouldn't do this. It's like I don't agree with that premise. The studies that are out there, they're not studies like you do on say drugs, or they're not clinically trials. There's a lot of anecdotal information going into these studies. So, and when we looked at this, there's the practical reality of running schools, and then there's the health benefits of potentially going to an 8 or 8:30. Really, Greenwich is the only one that I see, unless there's other districts that are further outside of, but in Fairfield County, I think there's 3 or 4 districts. I was going through them today. You have Wilton, Greenwich, New Canaan, and Westport who've changed their late school start times in this area. You've got Greenwich is the only one who's at 8:30, and you've got Wilton who's at 8:20. And Wilton was an early adopter. I think 20 years ago they switched. Greenwich is having major problems with their 8:30 start. Major issues. They actually don't even have the last period of the school day anymore because kids aren't going there. So you actually have to balance the start time with the rest of the child's day. And so we were looking at an 8 o'clock start because we believed starting at 8 a.m. was the best kind of fit. We don't know if it would still get the same benefits of an 8:30 start, but starting at 8:30 and going to 3:30 is causing, I believe, major issues in Greenwich. I don't know how long it'll last, but I know they've truncated their schedule and kids leave well before 3:30 because they have jobs, they've got sports, they've got a whole host of things.
I won't dwell on it other than saying the speaker that we had from Greenwich had a different point of view.
He did.
He had
He
a different
did.
point of view. And the only other thing I'd say, too, is the fact that others aren't doing it when every medical group says to do it, I don't think is really an appropriate reason not to do it. But I'll move on because it's a related financial point.
Sure.
The related, and I know you responded a little, I just want to understand this part a little bit better, too. There seemed to be in the report when start times were being evaluated that there was one of the things as a 3-tier bus schedule that would accommodate not just the later school start time, but it would also potentially significantly reduce the cost of busing. Now, I read the rebuttal, and it sounded like some data was, there's a difference of opinion, and it seemed like more study is required whether you can run some set of buses on a 40-minute turnaround or some set of buses have to be on 50-minute turnaround. Do they all have to be on 50 turnaround? And there was some concern of during November, December, and January, there could be darkness, but there could also potentially be remediated for a shorter period of time. It seemed in the study itself was saying that there's up to $900,000 of savings on a 3-tier schedule. I don't care if it's zero savings on a 3-tier schedule that had the high school going at 8:30 without an incremental $500,000. I guess I'm just puzzled how much has been really evaluated to pick up this type of significant savings and at the same time get us to the start time where I think we should be.
Well, I did make copies of the rebuttal, so for anybody who would like to see that, I walk through the multiple scenarios that was put forth in that CESO study, and it's you're not going to save $900,000. It's just you're not going to say they didn't even account for the extra hours that would be in the bus driver's
I think
times.
your recommendation. I think you caught that they didn't build the time in for some. That's right. I think 900,000 is not an accurate number.
Right.
But it did seem to be there's some hundreds of thousands potential savings and moving. Let me ask it this way. Is there going to be continued study in terms of getting us evaluating buses in significantly more detail than where we are today that potentially 3-tier could solve some things? Or is this done? The district is not looking at 3-tier anymore.
I think that's going to have to be a Board of Education decision. So
Can the board comment on that here?
I don't know if they're prepared to comment on that. I would tell you from the 3-tier system, just before they would do that, if they would, the one 3-tier system that makes the most sense that is used, that I saw and see used other places, is when you have elementary schools on different timelines. So that's the one thing that Trumbull could consider if they were going to do this. They'd have to have the high school. I think it was either the high school with an elementary or two, and then the middle schools by themselves, and then 4 elementary schools, or some function where 2 elementary schools started at different times than the other 4. I'm not saying that that's an impossible schedule. I just know the feedback I'm receiving is that if we really do believe in teachers being able to collaborate across the district, having them end at different times is challenging. Is it insurmountable? I don't know. But that's the biggest hurdle that you have to that particular schedule.
I hear the hurdle. I do think I hope it is significantly evaluated because there aren't that many places to save money in the budget, and this seems to be a big opportunity and potentially help start times. Last point, I'll move on. One of the issues that seems to come up each year, and you absolutely have a right to do it. We give you a certain amount of money, and you spend all that money. The challenge as I'm budgeting, and I mentioned this briefly last year, is that if we give you too little money, the kids are hurt, and I certainly don't want to do that. We have a fantastic system. It's terrific. The challenge is that I've kind of observed over the last 2 years, maybe a little bit longer, is when we are budgeting a certain amount of money, and towards the end of the year, there's a surplus. While you have every right to do it, and you're spending it down on programs that weren't necessarily budgeted but are good, it's challenging because my hope is that money would come back into the town and that we would we go through this budget process and say, how much money should we fund? And what's a bit of a catch-22 on my part is if I give too little, the system's harmed, and if I give too much, I can't ever get anything back. And since I know kind of the rules of engagement are if I give you too much, you're just going to spend it, there's an incentive for me to give you too little because you're not going to give it back. And so it would make it much easier for me if I knew that you weren't going to do that going forward without conversation with the Board of Finance. You have every right to do it legally, but I'm just saying from a budgeting perspective, it's really challenging, right? So last year you had roughly over $1 million and you spent it on different things. And I'm sure it was helpful for the students, but it was outside the budget process. And if there was ability to give a commitment that going forward, we're going to partner more. And if we have too much money, we'll engage in a dialogue. And maybe it'll come back to the town. That would make it much easier to fully fund the budget that you're requesting, or even the 4% that the first selectman's requesting. It's much harder to do it when I know the rules of engagement are, if I give that to you and once again you're over by $1 million and $1.5 million, you're just going to spend it down. Is much more challenging. So I don't know if I'm not asking actually even for the statement today. I'd love the board to consider it and say, if we have surplus, we're not going to spend it down, we're going to give it back to the town. That would make it easier for me to vote to fully support what the first selectman is proposing. So I'd like you to just consider that. And then the last thing I'll just mention for the room, I just happened to look at some numbers. In the 2013 to 2014 budget timeframe, we budgeted $93 million for the schools, and today we're at $125 million. That's roughly 10 years ago. If we look forward 10 years and we continue, and every year we say this is the last time it's going to be 4%, then we're going to go back to a more normal, a lower piece. I'm just going to say in 10 years, that $125 million is going to be $185 million. And I just don't think the town can afford it. So somehow or other, we have to figure out how we're going to work better together to control costs somehow. And so you guys are doing a phenomenal job building a wonderful education system, but we can't keep living off these 4%. So I'm just going to mention that for people to consider. But thank you for allowing me to ask questions
So
tonight.
just two things. I do want to just point out how much money did we give back to the board, to the town last year?
It was like 230.
269. So money went back to the board. I don't want there to be a belief out there that no money went back to the Board of
I agree
Finance.
with that.
And I think part of some of that other money we were transferring it to cover deficits in things like Elite and the strings and band. So I think some of those transfers ended up having to cover that. And one of the things that I would put additional money into is to try to get ahead on the technology plan. So if we've been so far behind on the technology plan, why wouldn't we want to try to get ahead on it? So that would be some of my thoughts. So because once the money goes back, we don't have it anymore. And if we want to try to get ahead on it, and so that's some of the thinking. We certainly don't spend to spend. And I understand your point. I do. I understand what you said about you're trying to find the right amount to fund. I get that. I can appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Scott?
Thank you, guys. I have a couple comments. I tried to take notes because I didn't want to interrupt, which isn't easy for me. So just to touch on early start times, my understanding, just to clear the air, I'm not for them. By the way, it would help me because then I'd get to sleep more. But I'm not for the change. My understanding is Norwalk switched, and they switched back.
That's right.
Because it didn't work. I've talked to a bunch of parents, tried to not give my opinion. Again, also not easy for me. And I have not found anyone in support. So it seems, well, needless to say, I disagree with Marty, but that's been known. And one of my concerns with the 3-tier system is I've noticed from what I've been told, there's been a lot of bus breakdowns this year, and that seems like a very bad ripple effect if we're using the same buses 3 times for the same schools on a very tight schedule, to have one breaking down at the first school and then subsequently rolling to every other school after.
Rolling, yeah. Well, I would say that like the New Canaan model, which I highlight in my response, they went to an 8 o'clock start, but they ended up putting like 20 minutes between their tiers, but they ended up just buying their way out of it, right? So they put like $900,000 into buses. So they just said, you know what, we're going to add more buses. We won't worry about having them have to do more than one tier.
It's not about money. It's yeah.
Dr. Summer, I just want to check. Would any instructional time be lost
on any of the levels if we do something like that? Because I know instructional time is important.
Right. So that's been, as we've dug into this more, because we said we put the $500,000 in there to talk about this more. And the board is talking about this and having conversations about this. But you would lose 90 hours of instructional time at the secondary schools based on the 8 to 2:30. As a professional, I can't support losing 90. Imagine losing 30 minutes of like something like, I love the trumpet. If I could practice 30 minutes a day and I lost that would be big. It's 30 minutes is not something to be scoffed at.
How do you lose instructional time by shifting start time and end time?
Well, it's not shifting. It's truncating.
Why would you truncate?
Well, instead of going till later in the day, the board had, and the late school start actually committee had recommended that we go 8 to 2:30 rather than 7:30 to 2:30, right? Yes. Instead of 7:30 to 2:30, they just lopped off the half
That's like
hour.
when we take a break and we have a half day before break, and we say, oh, it's just a half day. So I don't understand how that affects whether or not school start times. That's a whole other conversation. I was just curious. That it doesn't make any sense.
It was like I think you said like 4 minutes per period or something, and I did the math as well. I was like, well, that makes no sense, right? Because we want to keep kids in school, not.
Yeah, it would be 41 minutes for the middle school schedule as the current schedule stands if we took off that half hour. I personally can't make that recommendation to the board that we should lose 90 hours of instructional time.
And one more question. We still have to report to the state on our instructional times.
Correct.
And if we don't give the instructional time that's expected by the state, aren't we in trouble?
We would be, but we would have enough instructional time.
Okay.
Yeah.
We would have enough, just less than we currently have.
Less than we currently have.
Right. We're trying to put in more classes, more everything else. Taking away time kind of seems counterproductive. But I'll move on to real questions, but I have one that a parent had asked me and I couldn't answer. It's why does Bus Tracker not work on half days? Right, they're the same buses, yet somehow no one can track their kids when they don't know when they're going to be home. And I said, I got nothing. So
it should work on all days.
It doesn't. I will tell you, on half days, it does not. On drop-offs, half days, I don't know.
That's a new. I have not heard. I have heard that our Bus Tracker has issues sometimes.
Well, it has normal issues. It is, but it's like every half day, and everyone asks me, I'm like,
okay.
I managed to make it through the entire Trumbull public school system without Bus Tracker.
Listen,
I sent them my children in the morning. They sent them back every day. It seemed to work out fine.
Well, look,
Nobody wanted to keep
we can
them.
all hear the bus is coming, right?
All right, just making sure. All right.
Okay. So I'm going to go through my notes as we do this. I'll get my one big question out of the way. As you know, I want to move technology over to the town side. I think that there's more transparency there. I think that we can find economies of scale. I think that even this 5-year plan, we may be able to do better, being if we have town and Board of Ed resources utilizing all as one. I had asked you for what kind of plan that would need. I wanted to know if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I just want to ask you a couple of questions because I knew, Scott, that this was important to you. So can you just explain again, like what the rationale is for moving a line item or one of our items out and into the town side?
I'll give you the big one, which is right off the bat, and it came out of your presentation, which is that it was like the first thing that would be cut if the budget was cut.
Not the first thing that would be cut.
Well, it was the second. It was in the things that we're going to lose if we don't get enough money.
I took that out for this presentation because based on Mr. Soro's number, I won't have to touch it.
That's fair, but the number could change. I mean, needless to say, every year's budget presentation is one of the top, I'll say 5 to
Last year it for sure was, yes.
But that's what will come out first.
Right.
And we've all had problems going back at least 10 years where there was promises made, we signed contracts, things were gone forward, and I know this is not your fault. Mm-hmm. This was not on you, this was before you. That never actually came to fruition. And the need to make sure that we're keeping up with technology is important. It's important to me. I believe it's important to everyone in this room. And the way that we do that is making sure that we actually fund it, and it's not part of the here's a lump sum of $100 million, do what you will, but if you need to cut somewhere, that might be it. Mm-hmm. We know that it's, if you need, $2.3 million of technology, it's $2.3 million of technology. That's not part of the Board of Ed. It's from this could get cut later kind of conversation. That's where I stand. It's very transparent.
So when I thought about that, so your concern is that the Board of Education could end up cutting the money because we'd rather make sure that our staff who work with it. So I wondered what would stop. I mean, so the group here is very concerned about technology, at least the way you present that. What would happen if the Board of Finance changed and they looked at the budget differently and the line item was over in the Board of Finance, or the first selectman thought differently about this and they said, you know what? We're going to we're just going to zero that out.
Sure.
We don't even know why this is in our budget, and we're going to zero it out.
And that's a fair concern. It is, but it can be remediated. It can be, people can come, they can talk about it. It's a line item that you can see cut and dry. It was 2 million. We want to take it down to 0.
Mm-hmm.
Even though the recommendation from the Board of Ed for that is to keep it at $2 million. That's clear, that's cut and dry. That's not $25 million budget where we think it'll be spent on technology, and then 10 years later we find out that it wasn't.
Right. Well,
Right, because it will or it won't. It's not, and I mean this in the nicest way, it's not hidden in a large number. Anyone can pull up the town side budget and see what was spent for that line item any day.
But we can do the same. We can pull up every one of our line items in Munis, just like you can pull up on the town side. So
you can.
Right, and you can ask for that too.
Everyone else.
Right.
It's easier said than done.
But my point with Jeff, and it is on the website. But my point with Jeff going through this, we bought what we said we were going to buy this year. And I know you're saying, well, this could be about future years. I did wonder, because I want to just entertaining this, right? So when we say we did that, so when we wanted to identify the needs for the district, who's going to identify the needs for the district? It's still going to be our staff who says, here's what we need for Trumbull Public Schools this year in this particular line item that's now over in the
honestly
town's budget.
And it wouldn't be up to me, right? It would be a conversation that I think I'd like to have with you as well as the technology department here. In my mind, it would be somebody that worked here that would basically be the Board of Ed technology person for you. It would be somebody working for Bill, taking care of your resources.
Taking care of our resources. Because the other way could be do it, we could also just take in the town side over into the Board of Education.
We could give it all to you.
Because we're already the
right?
larger we're already larger. So the larger can consume the smaller.
Can we put plows on the front of the buses?
Yeah, we'll put plow. Ooh, I like that.
At least the, what is it, the
so
thing like a train.
I have my concern because
Yep.
I also wonder about E-rate. The Board of Education can access E-rate money. I don't know if the line items in the town side if it can actually even get E-rate money. There's a number of. I'm a fan of shared services if it works. We've talked about shared services and across our folks. One of the things we said is you can do shared services when you have people who are underemployed. But when everyone's working their fannies off, and I believe that the technology folks here in the town would probably tell you they're working hard. I know the folks over at the technology department in the Board of Education. So we can't necessarily try to eliminate positions by trying to pull technology.
For instance, we're getting new servers, and this is outside of my wheelhouse, so bear with me.
Okay.
New servers in town for backups. And in our conversation with Bill last month before, I don't know, I lose track of time. We could add on to those towers instead of having multiple servers all over the place and utilize 2, 3, maybe 4 instead of 10. Right? That is a cost. It's $130,000 or something like that.
Right.
That's a real cost on a hard item that could be shared.
We would have no problem having that conversation because we do obviously have to pay attention to the cost of our servers. And I think that Jeff's done a good job with our, just thinking about things like servers.
We've actually eliminated.
If you're going to talk, just go up to
Eliminated quite a few servers by virtualizing it. So that's why if you're looking at next year's line item, I took 2 servers out because we compressed and virtualized.
By virtualizing, you mean go to the cloud? Do you mean go to the cloud?
No,
Oh, no.
instead of using hardware,
Yes,
you use a virtual.
I'm like, wait a second, I just got
Wait, to say that again?
So if you have 2 hardware servers, you can virtualize one of them, and if you buy a larger server, so you can host multiple servers on one. The metadata. Yes.
Which is how much you got the sizes down last time.
But
Mark has his avatar out there in the meta.
The town's doing the same thing. They use VMware. We use Hyper-V, which is a free form.
Which, by the way, is a great thing to do, to obviously get the Board of Ed servers down. Sure. But you're thinking of the Board of Ed and not as the whole town.
So
right. So that's my only point that, right? Because you're doing what you're supposed to.
I think that that's a different discussion, and I'm going to curtail this just for a second. I do think it's worthwhile to look at this as to, is there a better way that we can leverage to buy equipment? Is there a better way that we can do that? What would that look like? I think this is a good basis to start that discussion. I'm not sure we will accomplish it by the time we finish the budget cycle this time.
We'll see.
But it might be something to have a joint committee that works on that with an outline of a goal of where we want to get to. I also want to thank you for hiring somebody with the same name, because I'm really bad with
Yes.
names, and at least we still have a Jeff. Some consistencies in my life really do help. Do you have other?
The rest will move on quicker, yes.
Okay.
Is there a cost to go back to the state medical?
No.
No, it's just, we can just slide right in?
Just the savings,
Okay.
yeah. Okay, there is a cost. The cost is you can't get out for 3 years
3 years, okay.
because there's a penalty to leave. So I do see that as a cost.
Correct, or at least you're locked in, at least you know that going
Yeah.
in. Okay. You indicated including funding for rugby and middle school track.
Yep.
What's the cost for track? I have to assume it's just for the coach, but is there other costs that were,
Yeah, sorry, that's I have to just pull up it's below the line, the costs. And that's also offset by the pay-to-play fees that we get.
okay.
So there's
it's
an
essentially,
offset.
it's no real ride.
Middle school track was 14,000. Thank you. It's very small here too. Middle school track 30,000 reduced by 16 in pay-to-play fees, so 14,000. The rugby was 43,608.
Would the pay to participate fees be the same at the middle school level as they would at the high school level?
They are, yeah.
Okay.
They are currently for like our cross country and our basketball
Okay.
and our esports.
Okay.
That works.
We're equal opportunity.
Just for a statement, just, I don't like this thing.
You got it. I got it. So noted.
But not to be,
I own that. That was
Yep.
my fault.
Thanks, Lynn.
I own that.
not to beat a dead horse, but just as an ad, all those numbers are not made up of the same numbers, right? So it's not easy to compare apples to apples because they aren't, right? Like you don't know how the town makes up their Board of Ed budget, what's
Agreed.
included in it. So saying that you're taking that number, dividing it by students, we had the same conversation last year,
Right.
is a false number. And I'm not asking for the real number because without digging through all their financials, you aren't going to get it.
Right. I see it as like Macintosh to Empire.
Okay.
Rather than so it's apples to apples, but they're not quite the same
I go
brand
like
of.
banana and grapes.
See, that's different. That would be very different. I don't see it that way, Scott.
So you indicated that you earmarked $453,000 for the non-lapsing account for potential inflation for last year.
for the year that we're in, correct?
How are we looking? Are we going to be spending that money, or are we on a? I know we're only halfway through,
Right.
but are we on a pace where that probably won't get spent?
You want to talk about that one? I think some of it's. I believe we'll be spending some of it. But I'll have Mr. Hendrickson meets with the finance committee every month.
Well, I meet with the superintendent every Tuesday morning to go over financials and other business office-related items. And I also meet with the finance committee of the board every month to review the financials. At this time of the year, we start moving towards year-end projections. And that we've already gone out to the department heads and principals to ask them to examine their open purchase orders and either close them if they are no longer needed, or to adjust their quantities and prices to what they got back to accurately reflect what is required and calculate an available balance. And then about April 15th, we normally shut down any additional purchases so we can fine tune towards year end. And the superintendent and I will look at the budget and determine the fine line of will we need the credits, how much of the credit, and then make that decision probably in the May timeframe.
Okay, so where are we running right now? Do we have an idea at this point or no?
We're running well. I handed.
I'm not going to hold you to it. I promise.
I handed out our December financials and their graphs on there of the budget percent spent year to date cumulatively, and versus the last 3 years.
I don't think it actually got passed out. I don't
I was
have
going to say, I
that.
haven't
Yeah,
seen
we
it,
didn't
but,
pass out everything. We could pass it out. We have the financial report every time that Mr. Hendrickson meets with the financial committee. He actually posts his notes that he goes over with them and all the financial documents on our website, so people can find every month with all of his notes. We do have copies here if we want to.
Would you mind just
Sure.
looking over
Or
those?
at least
so
grab
we do
that before I leave.
just as we're doing that, I just want to think the misnomer with the non-lapsing account is many times you have voted to allocate money from the non-lapsing account. I joked, I think you've spent that like $6 million worth of the $900,000 out of the non-lapsing account. But because if you look back at the different dates and the times that you've allocated money, you've allocated that same money many times. And what happens is at the end of the year, instead of actually taking the money out of the non-lapsing account, you're taking it out of the surplus that Marty talked about. That's the transparency that we're looking for. Another example, and I think it was misstated at your last meeting, was when you talked about what the board told you to do as far as, or what the town council told you to do as far as the $125,000 for the ed specs for a Hillcrest build. So when we were talking about consultant money to get that, you had come and asked for, you were asking for it in bonding, and we told you that that is an appropriate use of the non-lapsing account. You have that money at your disposal, and you did not take that money out of the non-lapsing account. So it's coming from somewhere out of your budget.
And it's in our monthly report, and it's under building, I believe, building improvements.
That's great, but you have that money in your budget that wasn't accounted for when we had the budget discussion last year. That's an example of what we're talking about when we talk about deciding what the right number is, what you need for education, because you have that ability to use that number. That slush fund of
It isn't a
thing.
slush fund, it's a non-lapsing account.
I understand. You
agreed to
can
by
call
the
it
Board of
whatever we
Finance
like.
and Board of Education. No,
That's fine.
To call it a slush fund is a misnomer and a slur.
I believe it is money that you can offset, but it was the way we had designed was that it was for one-time expenses that would take place. And it's happened multiple times. So that money comes from somewhere. Another example of that is in your budget presentation at the Board of Education when I was at the meeting, and you talked about something, it's a very small number, but you talked about right-sizing the line item for police presence at events. And you had adjusted that number from $65,000 to $90,000.
Correct.
Okay, because that reflected what you've been paying over the last couple of years. So you added the money to the budget. It changes the number. That is the right thing to do. That's the right place for that number to be. But where did we have the extra $15,000 to pay in the previous years? So it's being transferred from somewhere. I'm not saying you should be budgeted to the penny, but that's the kind of thing that makes it hard for us to decide what the right number is. I don't have any problem with your educational plan. I think you do an amazing job. I am so thrilled and thankful for the education my kids received. We just want to make sure that when we're spending other people's money, that we're doing it transparently. That's not to say that you're doing it wrong. I just can't look at your budget and see where that other $15,000 came from. I know there's a lot of transfers that happen. That's the design to protect boards of education so that people can't tell you how many teachers you have in a classroom or what your curriculum can be. That protects boards of education, that you get to spend that money in that chunk, and we don't have line item control. But we still want to know what the right number is to put in there.
Agreed. And one thing I'll say is that the operational review was something that was important to everybody when I first arrived here. Because when I first arrived here, there was an operational review that was conducted. And that operational review had some 65 recommendations that Joe Centofanti had put together, right? And we work closely. Peg Brindisi and Paul Hendrickson work closely with Joe to make sure that we're following all the guidelines, not just through the operational review, but that we're following all solid accounting steps. And it's actually through they've worked with Joe, and the way we do the transfers is exactly how he would expect them to be done. We're doing them exactly how we would expect them to be done. So when we say something like we had to up it to 95, where did it come from? It's part of and Paul can talk more about this. He's better at this than I am, but it's part of an org. It's one of our objects in our budget, and as he makes it very clear, Joe Centofanti, as long as that object is positive, you don't need to go through the details of saying this one had 3,000 extra, this one had 3,000 short, move it from this to there. You don't have to do that.
Okay.
So you're not going to be able to.
You don't have to, but you have to be able to explain it to us so that we understand that the right amount of money is there.
Right. So the objects themselves, if they're positive, then the final dollar in the object there will get moved to a place that's negative.
Okay.
Those are the transfers you see. You see the positives moving into the negatives. That is how it's done and how it's recommended by Joe Centofanti. And again, that's all going back to the operational review and good accounting
Okay.
strategies.
I'll let that sit for now, but that's our problem when we're talking about the numbers. We're not arguing with you about your educational plan. We're not arguing about that. We're just arguing about how do we figure out where that actual number needs to be to cover it all.
2 more and then I'll be done.
Okay, and then I'm going to move to Christine. And if you guys have questions as well.
One is a quick one, I think. You mentioned that that the bookstore is bringing in revenue. How much? I'm just interested in how well that's doing or not.
Not as much as we want.
Listen, it's doing
25,
what we want,
was it
right?
25?
But
Like 25,000.
I think we set it up.
I believe it's 25,000.
I was happy with break even. So
Yeah.
At the end of my financial report, there's a breakdown of the Elite bookstore, so it should have the revenue line item in there as well as associated expenses.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not breaking even. It's 25,000 revenue, but the net is negative 70.
Right.
Which is well worth the
It
millions
is.
that we're saving.
It absolutely is. But obviously, the larger that revenue number gets, the less that net.
Yeah, well, actually, our big thing is we believe if we can bring other children in from other districts, that's selling coffee is moot.
Makes sense.
Selling coffee is just an added. It's supportive. It's part of the program, but in terms of the financials,
Correct. The financial gain is
Yeah.
is- Not there yet. The last question, then I promise I'm done. On this page,
yeah.
it was stated that math and literacy levels based on scores went up with more to what? I'm good with numbers, and they got better.
Right. He was pointing out that slide with the.
Right, and I'm just wondering, give me context to that.
I would have to go back to give you exact numbers, but during COVID, we had a drastic decline because our students weren't in school and weren't getting the right
Sure.
resources. But also, what was masked is that we had half of the intervention during a time where we needed more. So when
just
we
for
added back
clarity,
in,
I'm all for them.
I would
Right,
just I would just tell you we have multiple, and we can send them to you, Scott.
Please
We
do.
have multiple. We've done smarter balanced reviews with the board. We've done iReady assessments that we've shared, so we can share that with you. And I guess I would just say that every one of our elementary schools being a school of distinction is because of the achievement scores. So clearly, that's just a
Listen,
nominal marker.
All my
but
kids
it's-
benefit from this.
Yeah.
I'm not.
Yeah, we can
I'm
share
not
that with you.
against it.
Right.
It's just when you say they got better because of test scores, I just
No, I understand. You want to see to what degree,
Right.
And we do have multiple years. We can send that,
All right.
so you
Thank
can
you.
look at it.
Perfect.
And we'll be doing an iReady mid-year update in March 12th board meeting for this year.
We have a few more questions on this side, and then I'll open it up to the Finance Committee. But does anybody need a 2-minute break to stand, stretch, or run to the restroom? We'll take a 2-minute recess. We'll come right back.
It's her fault.
right. I know everybody wants to go home tonight. So we'll get started again. I'm going to move to Christine Eliris, who has a couple questions on PPS.
Thanks. Yeah, 2 or maybe 2.5 questions, all on PPS. Really, the first question was kind of your commentary about REACH being at capacity, and that I didn't realize that we're accepting referrals from Monroe. So I presume that, you know, you were talking about tuition for all of our outplacements going up by around 6%. Are you guys, I would presume, raising the tuition that you're charging Monroe students to go into REACH commiserately with that?
Yeah, well, for the Monroe, that's been a long-standing, relationship with Monroe and Trumbull. It's just some years, it was a little bit of a lull, to be honest, and just recently we've been starting taking students again. But it's actually, when I came in, which was last year, there was actually a formula we utilized in order to figure out the tuition. It's basically our overall budget divided by the number of, I believe it's the number of students. It's actually a formula. I don't have it in front of me, but there is actually like a way that we ascertain what it is. It ends up being like 30-something thousand on a given year. So that's how we do that. I mean, I'd like to go to a flat rate and look at competitively what other, because I know Fairfield has a similar program. Just kind of looking at what they charge, just to make sure we're competitive, and also making sure like we can offset as much as possible. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. But to that end, right, a few years ago when all of that great work went into creating Next Chapter Books and really revitalizing that program and making it better, like, is there a way for you to do something with REACH? I know the space is very tiny and constrained, but have you put in any thought strategically at, expanding what the capabilities are so that you could take in more outplacements and it could not only benefit all of our students, but if it's at capacity now, what if it grows more for our own needs or then for Monroe's needs, but then also if you are able to take in more and then also get some tuition revenue from it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is a bit, usually it starts a lot lower at REACH, but it actually started pretty high this year. It started in the 20s. We try to keep it, like 8 students per teacher. It's usually like a rule of thumb that we use. So but capacity I use loosely because there isn't like a bona fide rule. But we started high this year. Usually we start in like the single digits, 10, 11. We started in the 20s this year. But the good news is about REACH is that we do transition students pretty quickly back to the high school once we're able to kind of get them in a situation where they can actually access the mainstream. So it's almost like kind of like a revolving door of students. So I'm not necessarily worried, but absolutely, if we do have space, we always take tuition. If there's any neighboring districts that are willing.
I'm just going to add to that because you just might not be remembering, but we are having conversations about the potential to have like a regional program. If we did a regional program, then we believe we might be able to get more reimbursement. That space over there is not a great space. We believe it needs to be renovated, and we are starting to have some conversations about what that would take.
Meaning the state would reimburse us more or at a better rate if
that's
we had
what
a
we're trying.
regional
That's what we're
program?
trying to ascertain. Yeah, because if we can become that hub where we can bring additional students here and create revenue for the town, it helps the surrounding towns. It helps Trumbull, and it would give our facility quite a makeover. But we'd have to talk much more with folks like yourself, and that would likely have to be. I don't think that would be below the bonding threshold. I don't know how much it would cost to build a new one, and then we'd have to look to see. We've had some minor conversations. We're not anywhere near like bringing anything to anybody.
Got it. Thanks. So then my next question was just also on this page, but it's really all related to the structured literacy training, right? I think it was mentioned that 100% of the staff is trained on Wilson and Orton Gillian methods. This is kind of a selfish question because my son has dyslexia, so he's getting great services, and Mrs. Newmeyer knows all about that. But just curious, is that down to, that's not down to the classroom level, that's at the
it's definitely
specialist
not
level.
Yeah, it's not the PPS level because definitely not all of our teachers are trained in structured literacy. I will say that to kind of course, supplement with more intensive services, we do train our special education teachers in Norton Gillingham structured literacy approach. We either the classroom, and we even have some teachers that are doing associate level, which is high level. It's very rare you actually see that in a district, a public school district, outside of like a specialized program. So we are doing that, and we're just kind of building capacity with that. So we work with an Orton Gillingham fellow, which is a high level Orton Gillingham trainer, to actually to train our staff and to make sure they're doing their practicums appropriately and the portfolio reviews. And ultimately, this is very important too, because as in 2021, the state developed a Office of Dyslexia and Reading Disabilities. So they put forth guidance and even recommend legislation for students with reading disabilities and dyslexia. So we're kind of ahead of the game with what we're doing with the Orton Gillingham in the PPS side. I know that, as far as the general education side, they're also making strides with that as well.
But would you
If
say
I
that?
can just add to that
sure,
just
go ahead.
1 second. I think there's a little bit of a hiccup there that our literacy specialists who are regular education outside of PPS are also OG trained, and several of them have even got their certified level, so it depends on how many years they've been in the training. And so there's a partnership between PPS and regular education in Trumbull that started before Dean and I and has continued to grow. So we're really lucky that Dean has continued to support us in that. But we do have regular education literacy people who are trained, and that's important because they can look at it, because OG in particular is a philosophy as opposed to a program. So if you're familiar with that, you can use that to also not only be able to work with children, but also to coach adults in some of those strategies that will work with children while they're in the classroom. The other piece that you're mentioning in terms of structured literacy, I just wanted to separate that because that's more of like the philosophy around understanding the education around the science of reading, and that can be interwoven in your classroom instruction without having intervention, without having special education, and really that's good for all children. So we want to make sure that that's embedded in what we do every day, which is also a part of what we're doing. So I think you might have heard, I know when Kate was speaking, her mention it in addition to Dean and all of the work that his staff has put in. And a shout out to, if she's listening, Ann Heath, who has really organized that and made sure that not just our special ed, but some other people are enveloped, so that we've started now. I think we even have a few regular education teachers who are not literacy consultants that are also beginning to learn the OG methodology as well.
Okay, very cool. Thanks.
Yeah, Lainey, I just have one question, but before I start, so as a product of the Trumbull Public Schools, and my wife is also a product of the Trumbull Public Schools and a teacher, I agree with the teachers aren't paid enough. My kids are currently in the Trumbull Public Schools, and I'd like to applaud all of the efforts of you, the administrators and the teachers in all of the schools that they've been to. We have only a few select ones to go from. One of my questions just goes back to the insurance that we were discussing before. With the change, were there any potential caps that were in place with the plan that we are in now that may or may not apply to the future insurance plan that we would potentially be going to? Could you talk to that?
So when we went out of the state partnership plan and into the United Healthcare plan, we were given it was like an 8.5% increase with a cap of like 10.5 or something like that. So we knew for those 2 years that we were capped out. But going into the state partnership plan, it's not capped. But in speaking with Sean Scanlon, who's the state comptroller, and the folks that work the insurance, they were talking to me about how claims were running very well, like 98% claims to the premiums, and that they're building up the reserve fund. So they're anticipating, and they can't quote me on these because they come out each year, but they believe they're on track for, I think they said low single digit numbers moving into the future. And I believe this year it's a 2% increase. So when they say low single digit and this was 2, I don't know what that number means, because low single could mean a lot. And they also, there's a county adder. They look at like the counties and that are more expensive, and they do all their calculations. I'm sure they have their folks doing that. So they're looking at perhaps a 1% adder for Fairfield in 26 and 27, but not for the 24, 25. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, just so you know, we were looking at about a 30% increase in UHC. So we had to get out of there.
Finance Committee, from the Town Council, does anybody have any questions? Okay, Mary.
Oh, see, that's not fair. You don't want to look at me. Okay, sorry about that. One quick thing, this is for Paul, from the 205 account for athletics, since we're moving the 85,000 for officials out of that account and going into purchase services, and we also have a carryover year to year in the 205, do you think that that offset that we typically have is 300,000 could be closer to 500? You could just say yes. No, I'm kidding.
I'll take your question under advisement and
Okay,
get back to you.
just curious.
Sure.
Mary, do me a favor, anything that you want follow-up on, if you would just send me an email afterwards, I'll make sure that I send just one list with
Okay,
follow-up.
thank you. Just curious about that. Transportation, I know we looked at overpayment. That's been discussed briefly. And I don't know if you have a number on that or if it's still being looked at for what the potential savings would be.
Well, transportation, when we got the invoices initially this fall, they normally, I'll take regular bus routes, there were 2 line items for 72 passenger buses and for 84 passenger buses, billed at 5 hours a day. When I got the September and October invoices, well into December, there were 7 different line items, 3 for 72 passenger buses and 4 for 84 passenger buses, billed at 5, 5.5, 6, or 7 hours. And so the superintendent, Dave Cody, and I have had conversations with Durham to relook at their invoices, recalibrate their routes, and bring their rates down. And as to the present time, we are close to the end, but we do not have final numbers for transportation.
No, okay. And then also, do we have prepayment? I know there was a 1% discount.
There is a 1% prepayment discount, yes.
So that's already fit in.
Yes.
Thank you. And then just a question, the supervisor of elementary special education, I know that's replacing the chair. One comment was that it would reduce specifically reduce the out-of-district placements. And I was just kind of confused how I could see, if we're talking about specialists, that we're going to start them early, they're going to help offset some of our problems that our younger students have on that side of it, but I wasn't quite sure how this position would help an out-of-district. And then also there was a compliance, I don't remember if that was that same, oh no, I'm sorry, that was I'll ask that one after, that was the other position. So how that would reduce out-of-placement, or if that was a hope?
Well, that department chair position actually has decreased out of this year is decreased out of district. Sorry, it's hard to.
Sorry.
Has decreased out of district placements because of the accountability. So in other words, for a student that's placed out of district, you typically have an annual review. You meet once a year for the student, that program that the student's placed in does the instruction, and then you meet once a year. However, this year with the department chair, we've really been trying to understand how our students actually functioning in that program, and when they're ready to transition back, we're starting that conversation very early. So we actually have a plan in place. So we've actually brought back students from out of district places with a department chair position, but realistically, that is a bona fide supervisory position when you're making those types of decisions with teams, and when you're when you have the understanding of what the implications are for out of district placements budgetarily, outside of just my position. So it actually, with the person that we have right now, which is Dr. Laura Bennett, it actually has we actually have brought students back to district. If that makes sense.
I just meant versus the chair, the special ed chair, the chair that's in now. You're saying this position to change it is going to increase that.
It's going to continue. So I guess the better
Okay.
word is continue. Thanks, Dr. Smith.
Okay, and then just one more, sorry, the supervisor of elementary education, we were talking about being in non-compliance, and that was from 2021. So I don't know if that was also a factor of COVID. Are we in compliance now so that we still have to, that we're looking at that that position, that change, or?
Yep. Oh, well, I'm happy
understand?
to I'm happy to announce we're in compliance for this year. However,
Okay.
they
I
look
didn't
back.
say that on tape, sorry.
They look back 3 years though, and that's the year they really use for monitoring. So was before my time. So I'm not going to take credit.
Yes.
But I definitely got the
credit.
past sins. But certain indicators the State Department uses are considered basic rights for a student with disabilities, and we fell very short, especially when you were looking at some neighboring towns like Derby Town. So this position was really, I felt this position was justified because we really need someone to monitor the compliance with, for instance, initial evaluation timelines. There's absolutely no reason to be out of compliance for those. So.
Okay, and then science reading, obviously wonderful. We're doing great, which I know Scott was asking about the data on that, which you presented. Are our state reps going up, or Board of Ed, or anyone to talk to the state? I know some of the other towns, like Westport, they were in the paper recently just saying, we're doing great. Why do we have to go with this program? I know you've been kind of all over that, but I'm just wondering, are we going the next step to say, this is what we're doing, and we're proving that we're doing the best for our kids?
Yeah, we actually have been, we were battling with the State Department of Education. So I guess I've been somewhat critical. They gave us this waiver process, but they didn't give us a rubric for it. The rubric came out after we had to submit the waiver. So they gave us the way they were going to score it after the fact. And then they scored us on it and said, oh, you were deficient in these areas. Well, if we knew where you wanted us to, put more of our time into explaining these things. And then when we worked hard, myself and Dr. Iwaniki and Miss Engeldrum, we had like principals and some teachers. We worked on a response back to the state. We requested a meeting with them. They gave it to us. We met with them. And they said, oh, we can't do anything because legislation says all you had was that waiver that you could submit. But then they gave us another meeting, and we did it again, and we talked to them, and then they just sent us a letter saying, sorry, legislation doesn't allow us to go beyond this. Well, we've been trying to work with our legislators. I'm telling them, you created this with the pen, you can change this with the pen. If you want to give us more time, you can. If you want to try to make sure that this is done well in Connecticut, which I think it should be, you should just provide a little bit more time. Because there are districts pushing back who are doing the best in the state, and yet the state's coming down on them, where there's districts who might have 8% of students reading on grade level, and then I think some of them actually had their waiver approved. But in their defense, they've already said they're going to make their changes to the science of reading. So they said we're going to make these changes, so their waiver was approved. So there's a...
I guess I'm just was curious if there's something that we can all do kind of as a community, other communities that are saying the same thing.
Well, you can reach out to your representatives. I mean, they're in session right now. I actually texted one of them today saying, "Where are we at? Is there any movement on this?" Yeah, I didn't yet hear back from that particular person. So we actually met with Jeff Curry, who's also all the Fairfield superintendents met with him. He's the chair of the education committee, and up at the state. So we shared with him our concerns as well, and he appeared to be listening and wanted to see what he could do. But he was also not telling us he's going to change things. I think he was looking for ways. We all support kids reading. I want to make sure I'm clear on that. We want every third grader to be reading on grade level by the time they're there. But it's the process and the how and the timelines and these particular programs that they're requiring us to buy that are sticking points.
Okay, and then last thing, you're very lucky. Not for tonight, but I know Paul, the Board of Finance, the Finance Committee had asked you about the subs, and we switched over to the way that we're using our subs, and again, it's too long for now, but I was just kind of confused the way that the line items were.
That was the best look of glee on Paul.
Oh.
Like, he just pointed
I know, I could
over
feel
there
it.
like, not my problem.
I know.
That was the best. I hope they got that on camera.
I could see from behind, the smile was there. But really just, I know there's some confusion about the way the line item has shifted from how the subs were being funded before. It's now going through the program, and it's still in just a kind of a looking, for me, I just wasn't quite getting it. So I'm sure I'm missing something. I know there's a benefit, obviously, but just how those financials are working out. And that was it for me. Thank you, everybody. You guys are great. Thank you.
Mr. Chella can address that in greater detail.
Well, why don't we, since you're saying it can wait, are you saying like at the next finance committee of the board that they can explain it in greater detail?
I don't know if the Board of Finance is curious about that or not. Even it might be one of the backup for when Laney's asking for the questions. Because I think it's one of those that's probably going to be, what time is it? Too long to go into right
Sure.
now. And again, probably asking more than you're prepared to discuss.
That's fine. We can ask for that in part of the backup. Scott has one follow-up question. Does anybody else on the Finance Committee have a question? Go ahead, Nikki, and then we'll go back to Scott.
I'm going to be much quicker than Mary.
We're shocked.
My question is just about the progress on the Hillcrest Planetarium. Is that up and running and ready to be used? Yay!
We have Jane Ryan going there. Jane Ryan, where are you? Going there? I think it's next week. It's soon, very soon. We have little kids going, so that's really nice.
So that's how that was my
The astronomy
follow-up
class is
question.
Going in too, so yeah.
That's
all set.
great. So is it being utilized daily, or how is that scheduled?
So we also have the principal of Hillcrest Middle School there, and so I think he would tell you that it's used daily, but not necessarily just for planetarium purposes, because it's sort of a multi-purpose space.
I would say it's used 3 to 4 days a week in some capacity.
Yep.
Very good. Thank you.
Scott, you had a follow-up?
A couple months ago, we funded a study for traffic patterns around the schools. With that, there's buses, especially in the elementary schools, that appear to kind of be grandfathered into their stops. Like they stopped for a kindergartner at their house because that used to be a rule like 10 years ago. And now that's just another stop next to the 4 other houses that are a stop. Point being, because there is a point, if we're studying the traffic, the buses clearly have an impact on traffic, right? Especially when they stop 15 times on a 100-yard road. What are you guys doing to evaluate the routes and the number of stops to make sure that it's most efficient for the people riding the bus as well as the rest of the traffic in town?
Yeah,
be more efficient.
Yeah, I agree. First and foremost, everyone should know, like when you're leaving any town, you should always know when the buses are running. Because if you leave at 7:30, you're okay. At 7:32, you're not okay, right? Depending on where you are. So that's the first thing you have to know. That you got to just avoid that, Scott. I'm sorry, but
Home, I'm good.
right, you work from home, so you're fortunate. But your point is well taken that we really do need to look at our routes. And we have a new transportation manager this year, and the first thing we had to do is just get her up and running. And it was challenging to get everything started. I just had a meeting with Mr. Cody was present, and actually Durham, and we've been talking about how we can reduce some of the stops. So there's some things that we're not going to reduce, but there might be some places that we should be able to reduce some stops along the way. I'm not sure that we should just take away stops now between now and the end of the school year.
I'm thinking next year.
Right.
School year, you put out a new list.
Yeah. And you're not thinking, one of the things we noticed is the way they used to do this in Trumbull, and I wasn't paying that much attention to it, is that kids weren't told this is your specific stop. They were told here's the list of stops, and then kids were like picking and choosing which stop made the most sense. Where's my friends? So we do need to be more clear on that. We've learned this year, and I don't believe you're talking about our major roads. Like you're not talking about Daniels Farm and White, because you know that in terms of sidewalks and just things like that, we're going to be much more careful on those particular streets.
I mean, I'll just say my road, for instance, right? So where my house is, a bus doesn't come through there. Not a problem. So it's really 30 houses, and it stops 6 times. And it's, a curved road. There's not much. I can only evaluate so much, right? But it's a small area, and they stop at 3 houses in a row.
Right.
Like, their driveways touch. It's.
Do you mind being in the transportation office when we get the phone calls from the parents who are going to completely lose their minds when
Forward them to me.
I'm just going to be like,
nice conversation.
Scott Zemoff told me to do this, so here's his cell phone number.
Right here. I'm good with that.
I know
really am.
I'm kidding, but we do get like you said, if they're grandfathered and they're getting used to it, that's it. We have to reshape behavior, and we have to make sure that people understand that. Yes, it's okay. But we want to make sure first and foremost, and so do you, I know you do, we have to make sure that they're safe and right.
It's safety's first.
Right.
Obviously, it's just safety for the children and everybody else around them,
That's right.
which doesn't always seem to be balanced.
I would add two things. One, parents, make your kids go outside and wait at the bus stop. They don't need to wait at the top of the driveway and then saunter down when the bus stops. That's a whole nother issue that takes extra time in the run.
Right.
I come down Madison Avenue, and when you say 7:30, I'm talking 6:24, 6:26.
Yeah.
It could take me 20 extra minutes to get to Fairfield because I have to navigate 3 Trumbull buses, an Easton bus, and 2 Fairfield buses to go 12 miles. So not that far. The other thing that it was really helpful in when some new board members came on, Public Works actually invited some members down from the town council and from Board of Finance to explain how their processes work. I thought it was a really great exercise, and George had done that. And we have done that in the past. I've actually sat in Dawn Perkins' office and actually looked at how they do the bus runs. I don't ever want a job like that, not ever in my whole life. I've actually, I sat with Julie Luby when she used to do the schedule when she was at the high school. This before, and to see what all the parts are that move and how you move 2,200 students in a day through that high school is unbelievable. And I would sit in Board of Ed meetings with Board of Ed members who would say, well, what difference does it make? How you have this many students, you should have this many teachers. It so doesn't work that way. So the complexity of those items, anything that you can offer by way of education for the new council members, for anybody who sits on this board, those things are very helpful. I have a whole new appreciation for how few people make all those things happen. There are 32 employees in Public Works who keep all of our roads clear during snow, all of our roads paved, pick up our leaves. That's an amazingly small number of people. So those things are really important, and they help when we're doing this to have a good understanding. So I hope that puts it in perspective, because we all make fun of, bus runs and, how many kids and where they are. But that's not just an easy job. So those kinds of things. I don't believe there are any other questions for this evening. I wanted to say thank you. I think this was extremely helpful and one of our more productive budget meetings. I think there are a few things that we'd like some clarification on. I will send you a list by email. We're scheduled for another hearing. I believe it's the 3rd week in March, the 21st maybe. I don't have the schedule right in front of me. I'm not sure we'll need that second meeting. We'll leave that in reserve in case something big changes, like all of a sudden the insurance numbers don't look like they're moving, if there's something big. And if there are any specific questions, we can reach out that way and tie it into perhaps our second budget hearing on that day if we have time when we're on Zoom, instead of having to bring everybody back to town hall, if that works for everyone. It is we were scheduled for the 21st, but we don't necessarily need to keep that meeting. I think we're all pretty much on the same page. There's some things that we'll send you for clarification. Does anybody have any last questions for this evening? And if you do have questions after looking for the material, just send me an email. I will send it to them. I'd like to just compile everything so they're not getting bombarded. I want to thank everybody who's sitting in the gallery. It is a very long day, starting as early as we do in our public schools. And I want to make sure that people in the audience know that all of our building administrators are here, and many of our teachers and specialists. So I just want to say thank you. And if nobody else has anything, I'll just take a motion to adjourn this evening. So moved, Scott. Thanks, Paul. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Huh?